While I was enjoying my first approved break in 6 years in Paris, my wife's father, the CEO, called. "What do you think you're doing? You're fired. We don't need a lazy pig." I laughed and hung up before he could finish his sentence. Then raised my glass and toasted with the man sitting next to me, the CEO of our biggest competitor, who happened to be staying at the same resort. When I returned, things got hysterical when the terrace overlooked the Seine like a painting I'd only ever seen in screensavers. The kind of view that exists in other people's lives, not mine. 6 years. 6 years of 60-hour weeks of skipped lunches and swallowed pride, of watching my wife's family treat me like expensive help they regretted hiring. And here I was finally with a glass of Chateau Margaux in my hand and the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance like a promise I'd forgotten how to believe in. The wine was exceptional. I'd ordered it specifically because it cost more than my first car. And for once, for the first time in half a decade, I didn't feel guilty about it. "You look like a man who just remembered he's allowed to breathe." The gentleman next to me said he was older, maybe early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of calm that comes from never having to check a price tag. His suit probably cost more than my monthly salary. Used to cost more than my monthly salary. I laughed. It felt strange in my throat, like a language I'd forgotten. Something like that. First time in Paris. First time anywhere in 6 years. He raised an eyebrow. The kind of expression that said he'd heard a story before I'd even told it. "Let me guess. You work in corporate. They told you the company needed you. That taking time off would be selfish. That the team was counting on you." Close. I swirled the wine, watching it catch the light. Family business. Same script, different cast. He nodded knowingly. The golden handcuffs with a wedding band. I should have been offended, but he was right. I'd married into the Hartwell empire, Hartwell Industries, manufacturing and distribution, 32 facilities across 11 states, revenue in the high 9 figures. My father-in-law, Richard Hartwell, was the kind of CEO who appeared in business magazines with headlines like "The Man Who Never Blinks," and how Richard Hartwell turned family values into profit. What they didn't write about was how he turned family into profit margins. How he dangled the CFO position in front of me like a treat for a performing dog, always just out of reach. How my wife Vanessa had slowly transformed from the woman I'd fallen for into a carbon copy of her father, all edges and expectations. No warmth left to spare. But I wasn't thinking about that. Not here. Not with this view. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it, saw Richard's name, and felt my stomach drop in that Pavlovian way it had learned over 6 years of conditioning. "You going to answer that?" the gentleman asked. "I'm on vacation." "Good man." It kept buzzing, then stopped, then started again. I picked it up on the 4th call. "What do you think you're doing?" Richard's voice came through so loud that the gentleman next to me could probably hear it. I held the phone slightly away from my ear. "I'm in Paris, Richard, like I told you I would be. Like I put in the request for 3 months ago. Like you approved." "I approved a weekend." "Not a how long has it been?" 4 days. "It's been 3 days of a 2-week vacation that was approved." I kept my voice level, but I could feel something shifting inside me. Like tectonic plates finally deciding they'd had enough. 2 weeks. Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea what's happening here? The Bergman contract is falling apart. The quarterly reports are due. And you're sitting in some cafe drinking wine like you don't have responsibilities. The gentleman next to me caught my eye and mouthed. "Family business." I nodded. He smiled and shook his head in sympathy. "Richard. I left detailed notes. I trained Marcus on the Bergman account. Everything is handled. Marcus is an idiot. You're the CFO. I'm the senior financial analyst who does the work of a CFO for the salary of a senior financial analyst, and I'm on an approved vacation." There was a pause. In that pause, I could hear everything. His shock that I'd interrupted him, his rage building like a pressure cooker, the calculations running through his head about how to reassert control. "You're fired." The words hung in the air between us, between Paris and Connecticut, between the man I'd been and whoever I was about to become. "I'm sorry." "What?" "You heard me. You're fired. We don't need a lazy pig who abandons ship. The moment things get difficult, you're done. Don't bother coming back to the office. We'll have security pack your things." I looked at the Seine, at the lights reflecting on the water, at the wine in my glass that tasted like freedom and cost like revenge, and I laughed. It started as a chuckle, then built into something fuller, something that came from a place so deep I'd forgotten it existed. I laughed like a man who just realized he'd been holding his breath underwater for 6 years and finally broke the surface. "Are you listening to me?" Richard's voice had gone shrill. "Oh, I'm listening. I'm just enjoying the moment. See, Richard, Here's the thing. There's no thing. I hung up, just pressed the red button, and watched his name disappear from my screen. Then I turned to the gentleman next to me, raised my glass, and said, I just got fired by my father-in-law. He studied me for a moment, then lifted his own glass with a smile. That suggested he understood more than I'd said. Then this calls for a toast. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I echoed. We clinkied glasses and the crystal rang like a small perfect bell. I'm James, by the way, he said. James Morrison. The name registered immediately. James Morrison, CEO of Apex Consolidated, Hartwell Industries' largest competitor. The man Richard Hartwell had spent the last 3 years trying to destroy, outbid, and outmaneuver in every market they shared. I must have gone pale because James smiled wider. I take it you recognize the name. You're Apex. I am Apex. Yes. And you are recently unemployed. He laughed. A genuine sound that made his eyes crinkle. I heard the whole terrace heard. Actually, your father-in-law has impressive lung capacity. He practices yelling. It's like cardio for him. Tell me something. James leaned back in his chair completely relaxed. In your professional opinion, and I'm asking as one finance person to another, not as competitors, what's H. Hartwell's biggest vulnerability right now? I should have said nothing. Loyalty, even burned loyalty, should have kept my mouth shut. But loyalty is a two-way street, and Richard had just set fire to his end. They're overextended on the Bergman contract, I heard myself say. Promised delivery schedules they can't meet without massive overtime costs. The margins are going to be razor thin. And if there's any delay, which there will be because the equipment they need is backordered, they'll breach contract and face penalties that'll wipe out the entire profit. James nodded slowly. And theoretically, if someone were to secure that backordered equipment first, Hartwell would be scrambling, probably have to subcontract, which would kill their margins completely. They'd either take a massive loss or breach contract. Either way, their Q4 numbers would be catastrophic. Interesting. James took a sip of his wine. Very interesting. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa, this time I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again immediately. Text message. Call me now. Your wife? James asked. My soon-to-be ex-wife, I'm guessing. Ah, she's upset about the firing. She's upset that I might have actually stood up for myself. That's not part of the script. The phone buzzed twice more in quick succession. I turned it face down on the table. Can I tell you something? James said. In my experience, the best revenge isn't dramatic. It's not angry. It's precise. It's walking away with your dignity intact and watching them realize too late exactly what they've lost. That sounds nice in theory. I'm not talking about theory. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, and slid it across the table. I'm talking about an offer. Apex is opening a new division. We need a CFO who understands the manufacturing and distribution sector. Someone who knows the landscape, knows the players, knows where the opportunities are, someone who isn't afraid to take a vacation when they've earned it. I stared at the card. James Morrison, CEO, Apex Consolidated, a phone number, an email address. I can't just you can't what? Accept a job offer? You're unemployed as if he checked his watch approximately 4 minutes ago. You're allowed to be employed again. It's not that simple. There's Vanessa and the family and they just fired you on your first vacation in 6 years while you were drinking wine in Paris. He leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Let me ask you something. If they valued you, would you be sitting here having this conversation? The truth of it hit me like cold water. No. If they valued me, Richard would have called to ask how Paris was. Vanessa would have sent photos of things she wanted me to see. I would have felt missed, not managed. Instead, I felt liberated. Think about it, James said standing. No pressure, but the offer stands. We can discuss details when you're back in the States. For now, enjoy your vacation. You've earned it. He shook my hand firm. Brief, professional, and walked away, leaving me alone with the sen, the wine, and a business card that felt like a loaded gun. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Vanessa. Dad says, you lied at him. What is wrong with you? I picked up the phone and typed, I'm on vacation. We'll talk when I get back. Her response was immediate. There's nothing to talk about. You're coming home now. I looked at the river, at the lights, at the half-full glass of wine that had cost as much as my first car and tasted like the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. Then I typed no, just that, 1 word, 2 letters, the smallest rebellion possible. I pressed send and watched the message disappear into the digital void. Then I ordered another glass of wine, the same bottle, the same vintage, the same beautiful excess, and I sat there on that terrace overlooking the Seine. And I let myself imagine what it would feel like to work somewhere I was actually wanted. The phone exploded with messages. Vanessa, Richard, Vanessa's mother, Susan, with a message about family loyalty and disappointing everyone. My brother-in-law Thomas with a surprisingly kind note asking if I was okay. I turned the phone off completely. The waiter brought my wine. The night air was perfect. Somewhere in the distance, a street musician was playing La Vie en Rose on an accordion, which should have been cliched, but somehow wasn't. And for the first time in 6 years, I felt like myself. Not the person they'd needed me to be. Not the role I'd been playing, just me drinking expensive wine, watching the lights on the water, holding a business card that might be a life raft or might be a grenade. Either way, I was done drowning. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd come to Paris to take a break from my life. And instead, my life had broken completely. But as I sat there, watching the city glow against the night sky, I realized something. Sometimes breaking is the only way to rebuild into something stronger. And I was ready to be strong again. The flight back to Connecticut felt longer than the flight to Paris had, even though they were the same duration. Funny how time works that way, how anticipation makes hours disappear and dread makes minutes stretch like taffy. I'd stayed the full 2 weeks every single day of my approved vacation. Despite the constant barrage of messages, voicemails, and increasingly unhinged emails from Richard, despite Vanessa's threats, then pleading, then cold silence, despite the part of me that whispered I was being childish, that I should just come home and smooth things over like I always did. But I didn't. I visited the Louvre. I ate at cafes where no one knew my name or cared about quarterly projections. I walked along the Seine every evening, sometimes alone, sometimes with James Morrison, who turned out to be staying at the same hotel for a European business tour. We talked about finance, about family businesses, about the particular hell of working somewhere that treated loyalty like a contract with fine print you weren't allowed to read. He never pressured me about the job offer. Never even mentioned it after that first night. But it sat between us like a third presence at every conversation possibility. Dressed in a tailored suit, sipping espresso. On my last night in Paris, James handed me a folder over dinner. "What's this?" "Nothing official. Just some reading material for the flight. Details about the CFO position if you're interested. Salary range, benefits, the usual." He paused, cutting into his steak with surgical precision and maybe some information about Hartwell Industries that you might find enlightening. I opened the folder just enough to see the first page, a financial analysis of Hartwell Industries, complete with projections, market positioning, and several sections highlighted in yellow. "Where did you get this publicly available information?" "Mostly some industry contacts." "Nothing. You couldn't find yourself with enough time and the right questions." He met my eyes. "I believe in making informed decisions. Whatever you decide about the job offer, you should know what you're walking away from or what you're walking back into." I tucked the folder into my carry-on. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't read it." "I read it on the plane." Every page, every footnote, every highlighted section that James had marked for my attention. And with each page, the picture became clearer and uglier. Hartwell Industries wasn't just struggling, it was hemorrhaging. The Bergman contract I'd mentioned was one of 7 major accounts that were underwater on margins. Richard had been bidding aggressively on contracts, undercutting competitors to win market share, but the actual costs of fulfillment were eating them alive. They were winning battles and losing the war. And someone had been cooking the books to hide it. Not cooking exactly, more like seasoning, creative accounting, optimistic projections presented as certainties, deferred maintenance costs, delayed equipment purchases that would come due eventually with interest. I recognized my own work in some of the reports, but twisted numbers I'd presented with caveats were being shown to the board without context. Conservative estimates I'd calculated were being reported as guaranteed outcomes. My careful hedging had been stripped away, leaving only the optimistic skeleton. And then I found the section about the life insurance policies. Every executive at Hartwell Industries had a keyman life insurance policy standard practice for a family business. If something happened to a critical employee, the company would receive a payout to cover the cost of replacement and training. What wasn't standard was the size of my policy, $15 million, or the fact that it had been increased from $2 million just 8 months ago, right after I'd successfully renegotiated the supplier contracts that had saved the company $4 million in annual costs, or the fact that Richard was the sole beneficiary on behalf of the company, and that there was a clause I'd never seen before about suicide exclusions being waived after the first 2 years. My policy was now in year 6. I read that page 3 times. My coffee going cold in my hands, turbulence rocking the plane while my stomach rocked for entirely different reasons. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was standard. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I thought about the increasingly dangerous efficiency consultations Richard had sent me on factory floors where I had to inspect equipment, warehouses where forklifts zipped past within inches, site visits to facilities with questionable safety records. I thought about the time he'd insisted I personally oversee a late-night inventory at the chemical storage facility alone despite that being wildly outside my job description. I thought about how tired I'd been lately. How the coffee at the office had started tasting bitter. How I'd had that weird dizzy spell last month that sent me to the ER, where they'd found nothing wrong but suggested I was probably just overworked and should take a vacation. A vacation Richard had initially approved, then seemed surprised I was actually taking. The plane hit another patch of turbulence and I gripped the armrest. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe 6 years of gaslighting had trained me not to trust my own instincts. I pulled out my phone, still in airplane mode, and looked at the last message Vanessa had sent before I stopped checking. "You're going to regret this. We gave you everything. Everything. A job where I did executive work for analyst pay. A marriage that felt like a performance review. A family that treated me like an asset on a balance sheet. Valuable until I wasn't and then disposable." The flight attendant came by with the breakfast service. I wasn't hungry, but I took the croissant anyway. Picked at it while I watched the sun rise over the Atlantic. Somewhere down there, Connecticut was waiting. Vanessa was waiting, Richard was waiting, and I was flying toward them at 500 miles per hour with a folder full of information that made my 6 years at Hartwell Industries look less like a career and more like a crime scene. The landing was smooth. Logan Airport, then a connecting shuttle to Hartford. I'd left my car at the long-term parking, and it started on the first try, which felt like a small miracle. The drive to our house, Vanessa's house, really bought with Hartwell money before we'd even married, took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of suburban sprawl and familiar exits of radio stations I'd programmed and coffee shops I'd stopped at 1,000 times. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like being a stranger in my own life. The house was a colonial revival in West Hartford. 4 bedrooms and 3 baths, professionally landscaped with a driveway that could fit 4 cars and usually held Vanessa's Mercedes and my significantly more modest Honda. Today, there were 3 cars in the driveway. Vanessa's Mercedes, Richard's Escalade, and Susan's Lexus. A welcoming committee. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the house I'd paid the mortgage on for 6 years, despite Vanessa's name being the only one on the deed. Looking at the windows I'd replaced, the garden I'd painted. Then I grabbed my suitcase, the folder from James, and my laptop bag, and I walked up to my own front door like a man approaching a firing squad. I didn't need to knock. The door opened before I reached it. Vanessa stood there, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, the kind of beauty that looked expensive because it was. She was wearing a cream cashmere sweater and tailored slacks. The uniform of a woman who'd never had to worry about price tags. But her eyes were cold. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here," she said. "I live here." "Not anymore, you don't." She stepped aside and I saw them in the living room. Richard in the wing-back chair like a king holding court. Susan on the sofa with her spine straight and her pearls perfect. Both of them looking at me like I was a stain on their expensive carpet. "Welcome home," Richard said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How was Paris? Did you enjoy your little tantrum?" I set my suitcase down carefully. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a vacation, one you approved. I approved a weekend, not a. He waved his hand dismissively. European sabbatical while the company crumbled. The company didn't crumble. I left detailed instructions. Marcus handled everything. Marcus is an incompetent fool who nearly cost us the Bergman contract. The Bergman contract was always a disaster. I told you that when you bid on it. I told you the margins were too thin and the timeline was impossible. You bid on it anyway. The room went quiet. You didn't contradict Richard Hartwell. That was rule 1 of working at Hartwell Industries, of being married to his daughter, of existing in his orbit. But I was tired of rules that only applied to me. You told me, Richard repeated slowly, that the Bergman contract was viable if we optimized our processes. I told you it was possible if everything went perfectly, which it never does. I also told you we should bid higher to account for contingencies. You overruled me. I overruled you because you're conservative to the point of cowardice. This is business. Sometimes you have to take risks. Taking risks with accurate information is business. Taking risks while ignoring your CFO's analysis is gambling. You're not the CFO, Vanessa cut in, her voice sharp. You're a senior financial analyst who's gotten too big for his position. There it was. The truth, finally said out loud. I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to find the woman who'd once laughed at my jokes, who'd stayed up late talking about dreams and fears, who'd promised that her family would see my value eventually. She was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed. Maybe I'd just been in love with potential with the hope that someday I'd be good enough for them. You're right, I said quietly. I'm not the CFO. I just do all the work of a CFO for a fraction of the salary with none of the authority. My mistake was thinking that might change. Your mistake? Richard stood up. All 6'2" of him with his silver hair and his custom suit and his absolute certainty that he was right about everything was thinking you could embarrass this family without consequences. You hung up on me. You ignored Vanessa's calls. You stayed in Paris like some kind of a person on vacation. I offered. His face went red. You're fired. I told you that already. You're fired. And you're going to sign these papers. He gestured to the coffee table where a stack of documents waited, flagged with bright orange tabs. I didn't move toward them. What papers? Separation papers from the company and from Vanessa. We're making this clean. How efficient. Don't be snide. You're not in a position to be snide-eyed. You're going to sign. You're going to take your severance, which is generous considering, and you're going to leave this family alone. I walked over to the coffee table, looked down at the papers, non-disclosure agreement, non-compete clause, settlement and release. Divorce papers already filled out with Vanessa petitioning on grounds of abandonment and mental cruelty. Mental cruelty. That was almost funny. And if I don't sign, then you get nothing. Vanessa said, no severance, no recommendation. We'll make sure no one in this industry ever hires you. You'll be done. I thought about the folder in my laptop bag, about James Morrison's offer, about the life insurance policy with my name on it and 15 million reasons for me to have an accident. I need to think about it. There's nothing to think about, Richard snapped. Sign the papers today. Now, no. The word hung in the air like smoke. Susan finally spoke, her voice measured and cold. Don't be foolish. You came from nothing. We gave you everything. A job, a home, a place in this family. This is more than fair. Fair? I tasted the word. I worked 60-hour weeks for 6 years. I saved the company millions. I asked for one vacation and you fired me for taking it. But sure, fair. You abandoned your post. Richard said, I took an approved vacation after I told you not to after you initially approved it. You don't get to change the rules retroactively. I am the CEO of this company. I can do whatever I want. And there it was. The truth underneath all the corporate speak, all the talk about family values and teamwork. Richard Hartwell could do whatever he wanted. And everyone else had to smile and say, thank you. I picked up the divorce papers, flipped through them. Vanessa got the house, the car, the furniture. I got 30 days to vacate and a settlement of $50,000 contingent on signing the non-disclosure and non-compete. $50,000 for 6 years of my life. I'll think about it. I said again, there's a deadline. Vanessa said, you have 72 hours. After that, the offer is withdrawn and we file for divorce without settlement. You'll get nothing. I looked at her. This woman I'd loved who'd promised to be my partner. When did you stop being on my side? When you stopped being useful, she said. And at least she was honest. I picked up my suitcase. I'll be back for my things. You have 72 hours, Richard reminded me. I walked out of that house, out of that life. And I didn't look back. In my car, I sat with the engine running, looking at the folder from James Morrison. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on his business card. He answered on the second ring. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I need to know something, I said. That job offer, is it real? Not a pity hire, not a favor. Real. It's real. I need a CFO who understands this industry. You're the best person I know for the job. So, yes, it's real. When can I start? I could hear the smile in his voice. How soon can you get to New York? I can be there tomorrow. Then, let's say tomorrow. 10 a.m. My office. We'll discuss terms, go over the division structure, and if we're both happy, you can sign on immediately. What about the non-compete Hartwell will make me sign? Non-competes are tricky in Connecticut, especially when the firing was retaliatory and the employee was on approved leave. But we'll have our lawyers look at it. I'm not worried. I looked at the house one more time. At the life I'd built that had never really been mine. I'll see you tomorrow, I said. Welcome to Apex, James said, and hung up. I drove to a hotel in Marriott near the highway. Clean and anonymous. I ordered room service, spread the Hartwell documents across the bed, and started reading. By midnight, I had a list of 15 regulatory issues, 8 accounting irregularities, and 1 life insurance policy that made my blood run cold. By 2 meters, I had a plan. And by dawn, I was ready to burn it all down. Not with anger, not with drama, with evidence, with precision, with the kind of quiet revenge that Richard Hartwell would never see coming. The Apex Consolidated building in Manhattan was everything Hartwell Industries headquarters. Wasn't sleek glass and steel rising 40 stories above Midtown with a lobby that looked like modern art, had made it with architecture, and produced something beautiful. No wood paneling, no oil paintings of stern-faced founders, just clean lines, natural light, and a reception desk where the security guard smiled at me like I was a person, not an interruption. "You must be Mr. Chen," she said, checking her tablet. "Mr. Morrison is expecting you. 4th floor, suite 4000. The elevators are to your right." I'd worn my best suit, a charcoal gray I'd bought on sale 3 years ago, that still fit well enough to pass for expensive. My shirt was pressed. My shoes were shined. I looked like someone who belonged in a building like this, even if I didn't quite feel like it yet. The elevator was glass on one side, offering a view of Manhattan. As I rose through the building, I watched the city spread out below me. All those lives happening simultaneously. All those people who had no idea that my entire existence had just reshuffled itself like a deck of cards. The 40th floor was quiet in the way. Expensive places are thick carpet that swallowed sound, art on the walls that probably cost more than my car, and an assistant at a desk who looked up and smiled as I approached. "Mr. Chen, good morning. James is finishing a call, but he'll be right with you. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water, tea?" "Coffee would be great. Black. Thank you." She returned with coffee in a real mug, not a paper cup, not a styrofoam disaster, and gestured to a seating area with a view that made my hotel room seem like a closet. "Please make yourself comfortable. He shouldn't be more than a few minutes." I sat, sipped the coffee, which was excellent, and tried to calm the part of my brain that kept whispering, this was all a mistake, that I should go back to Connecticut and sign Richard's papers, and accept my place in the universe as someone who didn't get nice things. But then I thought about Vanessa's face when she'd called me useless. About Richard's smug certainty that I had no options. About that life insurance policy and all the convenient accidents that hadn't happened yet but might have eventually if I'd stayed long enough. No. I was done being small to make them feel big. David James emerged from his office, hand extended, smile genuine. He was wearing a navy suit with an open collar, no tie, which somehow made him look more authoritative, not less. Right on time. "Come in. Come in." His office was corner positioned with windows on two sides, offering views of both Midtown and Central Park. The furniture was modern but comfortable, the kind of workspace that said its occupant actually worked here, not just held court. There were papers on the desk, a half-empty coffee cup, a framed photo of James with 2 college-age kids who had his smile. "Your family?" I asked, nodding at the photo. "My daughter and son, both graduated now, both smarter than I was at their age. Rebecca's in medical school. Andrew's doing something with artificial intelligence that I only pretend to understand." He gestured to a conference table by the window. "Please sit. Let's talk." I sat and he pushed a leather portfolio across the table to me. "That's the formal offer. Take your time reading it. I'll give you the highlights, but the details matter, so don't just skim." I opened the portfolio. The first page was a letter on Apex letterhead. Offer of employment, Chief Financial Officer, Apex Manufacturing Division. The salary made me blink. $285,000 base with performance bonuses that could add another $100,000. That was more than double what Hartwell had paid me and almost exactly what a CFO should make in this industry. "The base salary is competitive for the market," James said, watching my reaction. "The bonus structure is tied to division performance metrics, EBITDA growth, cost savings, successful contract negotiations. You hit your targets, you make your bonus. Simple as that." I kept reading health insurance full coverage, no deductible, 401k matching at 6%. 4 weeks paid vacation starting immediately, not acred over time. 4 weeks, I heard myself say, and we actually expect you to take it. Burned out executives make bad decisions. I'd rather you take breaks and stay sharp. He leaned back in his chair. "I saw what Hartwell did to you. That's not how we operate here. Stock options, professional development, budget, relocation assistance if I needed it. The division you'd be overseeing is our newest," James continued. "We're expanding into precision manufacturing medical devices, aerospace components, high-tolerance work. It's a different market than bulk distribution, but the financial principles are the same. You'd have a team of 4 initially with budget to hire more as we scale. 4 people reporting to me initially. I expect that number to grow. We're starting with about $60 million in projected revenue for the first year, scaling to 200 million by year 3 if we execute properly. Your job is to make sure we're profitable at every stage of that growth, not just chasing top-line numbers. It was everything I'd wanted at Hartwell. Responsibility, authority, respect. There's one complication, I said, pulling out the folder Richard had prepared. Hartwell wants me to sign a non-compete 18 months covering the entire manufacturing and distribution sector in the Northeast. James held out his hand and I passed him the document. He read it in silence, his expression neutral, then set it down and smiled. This is barely enforceable. You were fired while on approved leave. That's retaliatory termination. The non-compete is overly broad. And most importantly, you'd be working in a different sector. We're not competing for the same contracts. He slid the paper back to me. Sign it if you want the severance. Our lawyers can break it if Hartwell tries to enforce it, which they won't because they don't want a wrongful termination lawsuit. They offered me $50,000 as severance. Sign it, take the money, and start here next week. If Richard wants to make a fuss, we'll bury him in legal fees. Trust me, he'll back down. I wanted to believe him, but I'd spent 6 years watching Richard destroy people who opposed him, grinding them down with the sheer weight of his certainty that he was untouchable. You don't know Richard Hartwell, I said quietly. Actually, I do. We've been competing for 20 years. I've watched him bid aggressively on contracts he can't fulfill profitably, cut corners on safety to meet margins, treat employees like disposable assets. He's good at projecting strength, but his foundation is crumbling. James leaned forward, his voice gentle, but firm. I've seen the analysis you did in Paris. I know you understand exactly how weak Hartwell Industries really is. The question is, are you ready to stop protecting him? The question hung in the air between us. Was I? For 6 years, I'd covered for Richard's mistakes, massaged the numbers to hide his bad decisions, found creative solutions to problems he'd created through arrogance and ego. I'd been a good soldier, a loyal employee, a perfect son-in-law who knew his place, and it had gotten me fired, divorced, and nearly killed if my suspicions about that life insurance policy were correct. Yes, I said. I'm ready. James smiled. Good. Then let's talk about what happens next. You're going to sign Hartwell's papers, take your severance, and start here on Monday. We'll announce your hiring in the industry, press new CFO for Apex Manufacturing Division, impressive credentials, exciting future. Richard will see it and he'll be furious, but there's nothing he can do. He'll try something. Let him try. We're not Hartwell Industries. We don't operate on intimidation. We operate on results. James pulled out another folder. This one thicker than the employment offer. This is everything we have on Hartwell Industries. Market analysis, competitive intelligence, financial projections based on publicly available data. I want you to read it, not as a former employee, but as our CFO. Tell me where they're vulnerable. Tell me where we can compete effectively. Tell me how we can win without breaking any rules. I took the folder, felt its weight in my hands. This feels like corporate espionage. It's competitive intelligence. Everything in that folder is either public record or industry knowledge. I'm not asking you to violate any confidentiality agreements. I'm asking you to use your expertise to help Apex make better strategic decisions. He paused. If it makes you uncomfortable, we won't do it. But understand, Richard Hartwell wouldn't hesitate to do the same to us if our positions were reversed. He has multiple times. I thought about the Bergman contract, about the bids Richard had won by undercutting Apex only to bleed money on execution, about the way he'd used my analysis to undermine competitors, then turned around and ignored that same analysis when it suited him. Fair play was for people who had power. I'd been playing fair for 6 years, and it had gotten me here. Jobless, homeless, divorced. Maybe it was time to play smart instead. I'll read it, I said, and I'll tell you what I think. But I won't share anything proprietary. No client lists, no internal communications, nothing that would cross a legal line. That's all I'm asking. Use your knowledge of the industry. That's not proprietary. That's experience. And you earned it. He stood, extended his hand again. So, do we have a deal? I looked at the employment offer one more time. At the salary that would let me breathe, at the vacation time that was actually meant to be used, at the title that matched the work I'd been doing all along. Then I looked out the window at Manhattan spread below us. All those possibilities. All those people who'd built lives on their own terms. We have a deal, I said, and shook his hand. The contract signing took 20 minutes. James's assistant notarized everything, made copies, filed the paperwork. I walked out of that office with a start date of the following Monday. A temporary corporate apartment in Manhattan until I found a place of my own and a signing bonus of $20,000 that would hit my account within 48 hours. I felt like I was floating. In the elevator down, I pulled out my phone and looked at the messages I'd been ignoring. 17 from Vanessa, 9 from Richard, 3 from Susan, 1 from Thomas, Vanessa's brother, that just said, "Good for you, man." Seriously. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called the Marriott and extended my reservation for another week. Then I called a lawyer, not a Hartwell family lawyer, but someone independent I found through a Google search and 3 articles about wrongful termination. Her name was Patricia Chen, no relation, though I joked about it when I called. She agreed to meet me that afternoon. Her office was in a converted brownstone in Hartford, comfortable and professional without being ostentatious. She was maybe 50 with silver-streaked black hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she didn't waste time on, so she said after I'd explained the situation, "Fired while on approved vacation, pressured to sign a separation agreement within 72 hours, and they're offering you $50,000 to go away quietly." That's the summary. Yes. And you want to know if you should sign? I want to know what my options are. She leaned back in her chair, stapled her fingers. Option 1, you sign, take the money, and move on. It's clean, it's fast, and you avoid a legal battle. Option 2, you don't sign, and you sue for wrongful termination. Connecticut is an at-will state. But there are exceptions, retaliation being one of them. If you can prove they fired you specifically for taking approved vacation time, you might have a case. How would I prove that? Do you have documentation that the vacation was approved? Email approval from Richard. Dated 3 months ago. Perfect. Do you have evidence that he fired you specifically because you took the vacation? I thought about the phone call in Paris. He said it on the phone. I don't have a recording. Witnesses? A restaurant full of people, but they were speaking French mostly though. I paused, remembering. James Morrison was sitting next to me. He heard everything. Patricia raised an eyebrow. James Morrison of Apex Consolidated. That James Morrison the same. He's offered me a job as CFO. CFO, that complicates things. If you sue Hartwell and you're already working for their competitor, it looks retaliatory on your part, not theirs. The optics are terrible. So, I should just sign and let them win. I didn't say that. I said the optics are terrible for a lawsuit. But here's what I'd recommend. Sign the agreement, take the severance, and keep detailed records of everything. Every email, every text message, every communication. Because if Hartwell tries to enforce that non-compete against you, we'll have grounds to argue it's retaliatory and therefore unenforceable. We won't have to prove wrongful termination. We just have to show that the non-compete is being used to punish you for taking legal employment elsewhere. It made sense. Don't fight the battle they wanted me to fight. Wait for them to overreach, then strike. And the divorce, that's trickier. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, meaning marital assets get divided fairly, not necessarily equally. How long were you married? 6 years. And you worked at Hartwell during that entire time? Yes. Did you contribute to the household income? I paid the mortgage, all the utilities, groceries, most expenses, but the house is in her name only. It was bought before we married with Hartwell money. Her name is the only one on the deed. Patricia made a note. That works in your favor. Actually, if the house is her separate property, you have no claim to it, but she also can't claim you owe her anything for it. What about retirement accounts, savings, investments? I have a 401k from Hartwell with maybe $80,000 in it. She has significantly more family money. Then the divorce should be straightforward. You take your 401k, she takes her assets, you split any joint accounts, and you're done. Don't fight for things that aren't worth the legal fees. She's claiming mental cruelty, Patricia snorted. They always do. It's boilerplate language for no-fault divorce. Don't take it personally. What matters is the asset division and whether there's alimony. Alimony in a 6-year marriage where both parties worked. Unlikely. But if she asks for it, we'll counter with the fact that you were the primary breadwinner for household expenses while she had access to family wealth. It'll go nowhere. I left Patricia's office with a plan. Sign the Hartwell papers, take the severance, start at Apex, and let Richard make the first wrong move because he would. Men like Richard Hartwell always did. They couldn't help themselves. That evening, I sat in my hotel room and read through the Apex folder on Hartwell Industries. Page by page, section by section, I saw my former employer through new eyes. They were overextended in 7 markets. They'd deferred maintenance on critical equipment. They'd underbid on contracts to steal market share, but the actual margins were killing them. Their workforce was demoralized. I could see it in the turnover numbers, in the Glassdoor reviews, in the safety incident reports that were trending upward, and that life insurance policy. $15 million increased right after I'd saved them $4 million. I pulled out my laptop and started making notes. Not about proprietary information, I wouldn't violate my confidentiality obligations, but about patterns, about decision processes, about the kind of strategic thinking that led companies to chase short-term wins at the expense of long-term stability. By midnight, I had a 20-page analysis of where Apex could compete effectively without directly challenging Hartwell's existing contracts. New markets, different sectors, better margins. I sent it to James with a simple note. Preliminary thoughts. More to come. His response came back within minutes. This is excellent. You're going to do great here. Get some sleep. Monday's going to be busy. I closed my laptop and lay back on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. 72 hours ago, I'd been in Paris drinking wine and pretending my life wasn't falling apart. Now I had a new job, a new future, and a plan. Richard Hartwell had fired me thinking I had nowhere to go. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The Hartwell Industries headquarters looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it had always been small, and I just convinced myself it was impressive because I needed to believe I was working somewhere that mattered. The building was a converted mill from the 1922. All red brick and arched windows that Richard liked to call historic and authentic, which was corporate speak for outdated and expensive to maintain. I parked in the visitor section. They'd already deactivated my employee badge. Apparently, the security guard at the front desk, Marcus, who I chatted with every morning for 6 years, looked uncomfortable when he saw me. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry. I have to, I know. Visitor badge. I'm here to see Richard Hartwell. He's expecting me. Marcus made the call, his voice low, then slid a temporary badge across the desk. 3rd floor. But you know that already. Thanks, Marcus. How's your daughter doing? She was applying to colleges, right? His face softened. Got into UConn. Full ride. She's over the moon. That's wonderful. Tell her congratulations from me. I will. And Mr. Chen, for what it's worth. I'm sorry about how things went down. I clipped the visitor badge to my jacket. Not your fault. Take care of yourself. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt longer than the 40-story ascent at Apex had. Familiar territory is always harder to leave than new ground is to claim. I saw the water stain on the ceiling that facilities had been meaning to fix for 2 years. The motivational poster about teamwork that someone had hung ironically and that Richard had never noticed was ironic. The smell of burned coffee from the break room where the pot was always left on too long. This had been my life, my daily reality, and I'd thought it was normal. The executive suite was at the end of the hall behind double doors that were supposed to look impressive but mostly just looked heavy. Richard's assistant, Jennifer, who'd always been kind to me, glanced up from her desk with an expression I couldn't quite read. David, they're waiting for you in the conference room. They Mr. Hartwell, Mrs. Hartwell, and Vanessa. And the lawyers? Of course, there were lawyers. Thanks for the warning, Jennifer. She lowered her voice. I put together your termination paperwork. They didn't give me much to work with for the severance calculation. I'm sorry. You did what you could. I appreciate it. The conference room was the largest one in the building with a long mahogany table that could seat 20 minutes, but today held only 5. Richard at the head, Susan to his right, Vanessa to his left, and 2 men in expensive suits who radiated attorney-like cologne. Richard didn't stand when I entered. You're late. I checked my watch. I'm 2 minutes early, actually. I said 10 o'clock. Your assistant said 10:30. He waved his hand dismissively, as if the contradiction was my fault somehow. Sit down. Let's get this over with. I sat across from Vanessa, who wouldn't meet my eyes. She was wearing navy, a power color meant to make her look authoritative, but she just looked tired. There were circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and her hands were clasped too tightly on the table. One of the lawyers, the older one, with silver hair and a Rolex that probably cost more than my car, slid a stack of documents across the table. Mr. Chen, I'm Robert Fitzgerald, representing Hartwell Industries. This is my colleague, Daniel Park. We've prepared the separation documents we discussed. I'll walk you through each section. I've already read them, I said. My attorney reviewed them as well. Richard's eyebrow went up. You hired an attorney? You hired 2? I hired 1. Seemed reasonable. This doesn't need to be adversarial, Susan said, her voice syrupy with false warmth. We're all family here. We're really not, I said quietly. But go ahead, Mr. Fitzgerald. Let's hear the terms. Fitzgerald cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with my tone. The separation agreement consists of 4 components: termination of employment, severance package, non-disclosure agreement, and non-compete clause. Let's start with termination. He flipped to the first flag page. Hartwell Industries is terminating your employment effective immediately, citing voluntary abandonment of position and breach of operational standards. I took an approved vacation. That's not abandonment. The approval was conditional upon operational needs, which changed during your absence. That's not what the approval email says. It's unconditional approval for 2 weeks, dated 3 months ago. Fitzgerald's jaw tightened. Regardless, the termination stands. The severance package is $50,000 contingent upon signing the NDA and non-compete. The NDA prohibits you from disclosing any confidential information about Hartwell Industries, its operations, clients, or financial status. The non-compete prevents you from working in the manufacturing or distribution sector in the Northeast for 18 months. 18 months is a long time to be unemployed. I said, "You should have thought of that before abandoning your responsibilities," Richard snapped. "I took a vacation that you approved. I approved a weekend. The email says 2 weeks. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice brittle. "Can we just get through this, please?" I looked at her. This woman I'd shared a bed with for 6 years, who'd promised to be my partner and everything. "Are you okay?" "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't pretend you care." "I'm not pretending. You look exhausted." "I'm exhausted because you've turned our lives upside down with your selfishness. Do you have any idea what this has done to me? To my reputation. Everyone's talking about how my husband abandoned me to drink wine in Paris. I didn't abandon you. I took a vacation. You ignored my calls. You stayed away for 2 weeks while I had to explain to everyone why you weren't here. You could have told them I was on vacation. That would have been accurate." Her eyes flashed. "You embarrassed this family." "I took a vacation," I repeated, keeping my voice level. "That's not embarrassing. That's normal." "Nothing about this is normal," Susan interjected. "Normal husbands don't disappear to Europe. Normal employees don't ignore their bosses' calls. Normal bosses don't call employees on vacation and fire them for taking approved time off." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Are you going to sign these papers or not?" I pulled out my own folder, the employment offer from Apex, which I'd brought specifically for this moment. I slid it across the table to Richard. "I'll sign, but I want you to see this first." Richard opened the folder, scanned the first page, and his face went from red to purple. "You're working for Apex. I'm going to be starting Monday as their CFO." "The hell you are? You're signing a non-compete, which my attorney says is unenforceable given that you fired me for taking approved leave, but I'll sign it anyway because I want the severance money and because Apex's lawyers have assured me they can break it if you try to enforce it." You little Richard caught himself visibly struggling for control. "You can't do this. I won't allow it. You don't have a say. You fired me, remember? This is corporate espionage." "No, it's new employment. I haven't shared any proprietary information. I won't share any proprietary information, but my experience in this industry isn't proprietary. It's mine. I earned it." Fitzgerald jumped in, sensing danger. "Mr. Chen, if you sign this non-compete and then work for Apex, Hartwell Industries will have grounds to sue both you and Apex for breach of contract. The legal fees alone would be substantial." "I know. But here's the thing. My attorney also explained that wrongful termination lawsuits can be quite expensive, especially when there's clear documentation that I was fired for taking approved vacation time, especially when there are witnesses." I looked directly at Richard. "How loud were you yelling when you called me in Paris? Loud enough for the whole restaurant terrace to hear? Loud enough that James Morrison, who was sitting next to me, heard every word?" The room went very quiet. "You're bluffing," Richard said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I'm not. I have the email approving my vacation. I have witnesses to your phone call. I have documentation of 6 years of exemplary performance reviews. And I have James Morrison willing to testify that you fired me specifically and solely for taking approved time off." I leaned forward. "So, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to sign your papers. I'm going to take your $50,000 and I'm going to start work at Apex on Monday. And you're not going to do anything about it because if you try to enforce that non-compete, I will bury you in a wrongful termination lawsuit that will cost you 10 times the severance and legal fees alone. And that's before we get to punitive damages." Fitzgerald and Park exchanged glances. They knew I was right. Employment law in Connecticut was tricky, and retaliatory termination cases could get very expensive very quickly. "You ungrateful?" Susan started. "Ungrateful?" The word came out sharper than I intended. I worked 60-hour weeks for 6 years. I saved this company millions. I asked for one vacation and you fired me for taking it. And somehow I'm the ungrateful one. "We gave you everything," Vanessa said, her voice breaking. "A job, a home, A family. You gave me a job I was overqualified for at half the market rate. A home with my name on the mortgage, but not the deed. And a family that treated me like an employee they couldn't quite fire. I softened my voice. I'm not trying to hurt you, Vanessa. Any of you. I'm just done letting you hurt me. She looked away, blinking rapidly. Richard grabbed the Apex offer letter, scanning it more carefully this time. I watched his face change as he saw the salary, the title, the terms, everything I'd asked him for over the years and been denied. $285,000. He read aloud. Plus bonuses plus stock options. He looked up at me. This is what you think you're worth. This is what the market thinks I'm worth. It's what a CFO makes in this industry. You know that. You're not a CFO. You're a senior analyst. Who did all the work of a CFO? Who saved you $4 million on supplier contracts? Who fixed your accounting systems? Who covered for your bad decisions so many times I lost count? I kept my voice steady. You knew what I was worth, Richard. You just didn't want to pay it. Fitzgerald cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a brief recess. No recess, Richard said. He wants to sign. Let him sign. But I want an amendment to the NDA, anything he learned while working here, any knowledge of our operations, our clients, our strategies. That's confidential. He shares any of that with Apex and we'll sue him into bankruptcy. I already agreed to that. I said the NDA is fine. I won't share client lists, internal communications, or proprietary processes. My attorney confirmed that's reasonable. What about the Bergman contract? Richard demanded. You worked on that. You know the details. I know you underbid by approximately 30% to win it and that you're going to lose money on fulfillment, but I don't know the specific terms. I don't have access to the contract documents and I won't share anything proprietary about it. What I will do is tell Apex not to bid on similar contracts because the margins are terrible. But that's strategic advice based on industry knowledge, not corporate espionage. Fitzgerald made a note. We should add specific language about the Bergman contract. No, I interrupted. The NDA covers all confidential information. We don't need special carve-outs for individual contracts. That just creates ambiguity. Park, the younger attorney, finally spoke up. He's right. The broader language is actually more protective. Specific exemptions create loopholes. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but Fitzgerald nodded in agreement. Mr. Park is correct. The current NDA language is comprehensive. Fine. Richard shoved the papers toward me. Sign it. Take your money and get out of my building. I pulled out my pen, a M. Blanc I bought myself years ago, back when I still believed expensive things could make you feel valuable, and turned to the first flagged page, the termination agreement. I read it one more time, looking for traps. It said I was terminated for operational needs, not cause, which meant I could collect unemployment if I needed to. The severance was contingent on signing the other documents, but there was no clawback provision. If they later decided they didn't like what I was doing. I signed the NDA standard language about not disclosing confidential information. Nothing I hadn't already agreed to in my original employment contract. I wouldn't share client lists or internal documents. I could live with that. I signed the non-compete. 18 months manufacturing and distribution sector Northeast region. My attorney had already confirmed it was overly broad and likely unenforceable, especially given the circumstances of my termination, but I'd sign it, take the severance, and let Hartwell make the first move if they wanted to challenge my employment at Apex. I signed and finally the divorce papers. This was the part I'd been dreading, though I wasn't sure why. The marriage had been over long before Paris. Maybe it had been over from the beginning, and I'd just been too hopeful to see it. The terms were actually reasonable. No alimony, clean split of assets. Vanessa kept the house in her accounts. I kept my 401k in my car. We divided the joint checking account about $8,000 down the middle. No children, thankfully, to complicate things. I looked at Vanessa before I signed this one. She was staring at her hands, at the wedding ring she was still wearing, at the manicured nails and the diamond bracelet her parents had given her for our 5th anniversary. Vanessa, I said quietly. She looked up and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret or maybe just exhaustion. It was hard to tell anymore. I'm sorry it came to this, I said. Are you? Because you seem pretty happy about your new job. I'm relieved about the job, but I'm sorry about us. I really thought we could make it work. So did I. Her voice was barely a whisper. But you changed. I took a vacation. You stopped being the person I married. Maybe I stopped being the person you needed me to be. Those aren't the same thing. She didn't answer. Just looked back down at her hands. I signed the divorce papers. Fitzgerald gathered all the documents, checking each signature, each initial, each flagged section. Everything appears to be in order. Mr. Chen, you'll receive the severance payment within 5 business days. The NDA and non-compete are effective immediately. Understood. Richard stood, which apparently meant the meeting was over. You're making a mistake. Apex is going to chew you up and spit you out. And when they do, don't come crawling back here. I wouldn't dream of it, I said, standing as well. But for what it's worth, Richard, you should probably look into the equipment maintenance backlog and the safety incident trend line and maybe bid more realistically on your next few contracts. Just some friendly advice from someone who used to care about this company's success. His face went red again. Get out. I'm going. I looked at Vanessa one more time. Take care of yourself. She didn't respond. I walked out of that conference room, past Jennifer's desk where she gave me a small sad smile, past the motivational posters and the water-stained ceiling and the burned coffee smell and out into the parking lot where my car was waiting. My phone buzzed as I unlocked the door. A text from James Morrison. How did it go? I typed back. Signed everything. I'm officially unemployed for the next 4 days. Perfect. Enjoy the break. See you Monday. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the building where I'd spent 6 years of my life, where I'd worked late nights and skipped lunches and sacrificed weekends, where I believed that loyalty and hard work would eventually be rewarded. Then I started the engine and drove away. I didn't look back. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn sunshine that makes New York City look like it's trying to sell you something. I stood outside the Apex building at 9:30 a.m., coffee in hand, wearing a new suit I'd bought over the weekend, navy blue, perfectly tailored. The kind of suit that said CFO instead of senior analyst pretending to be important. The difference was subtle but significant, like the difference between being invited to a party and crashing one. My phone buzzed. A text from my bank. Deposit $50,000 Hartwell Industries severance payment. I stared at the number for a moment, feeling something complicated twist in my chest. $50,000 for 6 years of my life. It should have felt like an insult. Instead, it felt like freedom seed money for whatever came next. A cushion that meant I didn't have to be afraid anymore. I'd already moved most of my things out of the house in West Hartford. Vanessa had been gone when I came by with a U-Haul, which was probably for the best. There wasn't much to take. Some clothes, my books, my laptop, a few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage. Everything else belonged to that life, and I didn't want it anymore. The corporate apartment Apex had set me up with was in Hell's Kitchen, a 1-bedroom with actual closet space and windows that didn't face a brick wall. It was temporary, 6 months, while I found a permanent place, but it felt like a palace compared to the hotel I'd been staying in. David, I turned to see James Morrison approaching, also with coffee. Also looking ready to start the week. He was wearing a gray suit today, still no tie, still radiating that effortless authority that came from actually earning respect instead of demanding it. First day nerves? He asked, falling into step beside me. Is it that obvious? You're early? You're wearing a new suit and you've been standing outside for 5 minutes like you're afraid the building might not let you in. He smiled. It's normal. Come on, let's get you settled. The 40th floor looked different on a Monday morning, alive with people, voices, the hum of a workplace that actually functioned. We passed cubicles and offices where employees were settling in, coffee cups appearing on desks, computers booting up, the ritual dance of a workday beginning. People looked up as we passed. Some nodded at James. A few smiled at me with curious interest. The new CFO probably discussed in break rooms and whispered about in hallways. I wondered what they'd been told. Probably not the full story, probably just experienced hire from the manufacturing sector or something equally vague. My office was 3 doors down from James' corner position, windows overlooking Midtown, furniture that was actually nice instead of corporate standard. There was a desk with a computer already set up, a conference table, bookshelves waiting to be filled, and a small couch by the window. Your team is meeting in the conference room at 10 o'clock, James said, leaning against the doorframe. I'll introduce you, give you some time to get to know each other, and then we'll have lunch to go over the division strategy. Sound good? Sounds perfect. Good. Oh, and David. He paused. Welcome to Apex. I'm glad you're here. After he left, I stood in my office for a moment, just taking it in. My name was already on the door, a temporary placard that would be replaced with something permanent once I proved I could do the job. But seeing it there, David Chen, Chief Financial Officer, made something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for 6 years. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to recognize my value. I was already recognized, already valued. The title on the door proved it. My computer password was on a welcome packet on my desk along with a stack of orientation materials, an organizational chart, and a handwritten note from someone named Sarah. Welcome to the team. I'm your executive assistant. Let me know if you need anything. Coffee preferences, meeting schedule adjustments, human sacrifice to the gods of finance. I'm here to help. Sarah, I laughed already. I liked Sarah. The computer logged in smoothly. No IT issues, no waiting for access permissions, no bureaucratic delays. Everything worked. It was such a small thing, but after 6 years of fighting with Hartwell's ancient systems and their IT department that treated every request like an imposition, it felt revolutionary. I spent the next 20 minutes reviewing the materials. The manufacturing division was indeed new, only 3 months old with projected first-year revenue of $60 million and aggressive growth targets. Current staff was lean, 42 employees across operations, sales, and finance. My team consisted of 4 people. A senior accountant, a financial analyst, a payroll specialist, and a cost accountant. Small, but that nimble meant we could build processes right from the start instead of trying to fix broken ones. At 9:55, I headed to the conference room. 4 people were already there chatting over coffee and pastries that someone had thoughtfully provided. They all looked up when I entered, and I felt that familiar flutter of first-day anxiety. Good morning, I said. I'm David Chen. I'm excited to be here. A woman in her 40s stood up first, extending her hand. Margaret Wu, senior accountant. We're excited to have you. We've been running without a CFO for 2 months, and it's been chaotic. Controlled chaos, corrected a younger man with hipster glasses and a Michigan hoodie. I'm Alex Rodriguez, financial analyst. Emphasis on controlled. Barely controlled, said a woman with gray streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. Patricia Okonkwo, payroll specialist. And don't let Alex fool you. It's been a mess. A functional mess, but still a mess. The 4th person, a thin man in his 30s who looked like he survived on coffee and anxiety, just nodded. Tom Brennan, cost accounting. I have reports for you whenever you're ready. Lots of reports. So many reports. I look forward to reading them, I said, and meant it. But first, let's talk about what you need from me. James is going to stop by in a few minutes to do official introductions. But before that, what's keeping you up at night? What problems need solving? They exchanged glances, and I could see the calculation happening. New boss, first day. How honest should we be? You can be direct, I said, sitting down at the table instead of standing at the head of it. I just came from 6 years of corporate politics where no one said what they actually meant. I'd love to work somewhere people tell me the truth. Margaret smiled. Okay, truth. Our accounting software is barely functional. It was supposed to be implemented fully by now, but it keeps delaying and we're running half the processes manually in spreadsheets. Truth. Alex added, our revenue projections are aggressive to the point of fantasy. We're supposed to hit 60 million this year, but we're tracking at maybe 45. And no one wants to tell James that his baby isn't growing as fast as he hoped. Truth. Patricia said, payroll is a nightmare because we're hiring so fast that I'm constantly onboarding new people and HR keeps changing the benefits packages and I'm not sure we're actually in compliance with all the state regulations for our multi-state workforce. Tom just slid a thumb drive across the table. Truth. All of our cost data is on here and it's going to make you want a drink. We're losing money on 3 of our 7 active contracts because sales promise delivery schedules we can't meet and operations is bleeding overtime costs to try. I picked up the thumb drive, felt its weight. This was exactly the kind of honesty I'd been craving. Okay, I said. Here's what we're going to do. Margaret, get me details on the software issues, what's not working, what we need, timeline for fixes. Alex, I want to see the revenue projections and the actual tracking data. We're going to revise those projections to something realistic and present them to James together. Patricia, let's get a compliance audit scheduled. I'd rather find problems ourselves than have a state regulator find them for us. And Tom, I'm going to spend this afternoon going through your data and then we're going to have a long conversation about contract pricing and delivery schedules. They all looked slightly stunned. That's it, Margaret said. No angry speech about how we need to work harder. No lecture about loyalty and commitment. Why would I do that? You've been holding things together without a CFO for 2 months. You clearly work hard. What you need is support, not lectures. I paused. Unless you want lectures. I can do lectures if that's what motivates you. Alex laughed. Please don't. We've had enough lectures from sales about attitude and team spirit. No lectures then. Just solutions. The door opened and James walked in with another man. Tall, athletic build, expensive suit, practice smile. David team, Good morning. I wanted to introduce you to Marcus Levy, our VP of Sales for the Manufacturing Division. Marcus, this is David Chen, our new CFO. Marcus extended his hand and I shook it. His grip was firm to the point of aggressive, the handshake of someone who thought strength was a substitute for competence. David, great to meet you. James speaks highly of you. His tone was friendly, but his eyes were calculating. Looking forward to working together. Likewise, I said, keeping my voice neutral. James clapped his hands together. Marcus, why don't you fill David in on the sales pipeline? Give them a sense of what we're working with. Marcus launched into a presentation that sounded rehearsed: number of active leads, conversion rates, projected Q4 closings. It was impressive on the surface, the kind of numbers that would make a board of directors smile. But I'd heard these presentations before. I'd given these presentations before, back when I'd been trying to make Richard Hartwell's bad decisions sound like good strategy. Those are strong numbers, I said when Marcus finished. What's the average margin on these contracts? Varies by contract, but we're competitive. That's the key. We're winning business by being competitive on price. How competitive? Well, the market, it's tight. We have to be aggressive to win deals. What's the average margin? I asked again more directly. Marcus shifted his weight. Depends on the contract specifics. Ballpark, 20%, 15, 10. Some contracts are lower margin, but we make it up on volume. What's the lowest margin contract we've signed? I kept my tone conversational, but I could see Tom and Alex exchanging glances. They knew where this was going. Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Look, I appreciate you wanting to dig into the details, but sales and finance have different priorities. My job is to win business. Your job is to make the numbers work. My job, I said carefully, is to make sure we're profitable. And if we're winning contracts at margins so thin that we lose money on execution, that's not good business. That's just expensive market share. The room went very quiet. James leaned against the wall, arms crossed, expression neutral. He was watching this play out with interest but not intervening. I think you're being overly conservative, Marcus said, the friendly tone fraying slightly. This is a growth phase. We have to be aggressive. Aggressive is fine. Reckless is not. Tom, what's the lowest margin contract we're currently executing? Tom looked at Marcus, then at me, then at James, then he said, the dentist contract. We're projected to lose about 8% on it after factoring in overtime and material cost overruns. We're not losing money, Marcus protested. That's just Tom's conservative accounting. That's accurate accounting, Tom said quietly. We underbid by 32% to win the contract. Even with perfect execution, we'd barely break even. With the delays we've had, we're underwater. Marcus' face flushed. James, I don't think it's appropriate for finance to be questioning sales strategies on David's first day. Actually, James interrupted, his voice mild but firm. I think it's exactly appropriate. David's job is to make sure we're building a sustainable business, not just a large one. If we're winning contracts that lose money, I need to know that. He looked at me. What do you recommend? Short term. Tom and I need to review every active contract and identify which ones are underwater. For those, we either renegotiate terms or we eat the loss and learn from it. Long term, we need a pricing approval process. Sales proposes contract terms. Finance reviews margins and risk. And we both sign off before we commit. No more surprises. That's going to slow down our sales cycle. Marcus objected. It's going to prevent us from going bankrupt. I countered. Fast growth is meaningless if we're losing money on every sale. James nodded slowly. I agree. David, work with Marcus to develop that approval process. Marcus, I want you to cooperate fully. We're building something sustainable here, not just chasing revenue numbers. Marcus' smile was tight. Of course, whatever the company needs. He left shortly after and the tension in the room eased noticeably. Well, Margaret said after a moment of silence. That was quite a first-day show. Too much? I asked. No, James said, pushing off from the wall. That was exactly right. Marcus is excellent at winning business. But he needs someone to keep him honest about pricing. That's your job, he looked at the team. David has my full support on this. Finance isn't an obstacle to growth. It's a partner in sustainable growth. Anyone have a problem with that? Heads shook. Alex was grinning. Good, David. I'll let you get acquainted with your team. We'll do lunch at 1 to discuss division strategy. Margaret, Tom, Alex, Patricia. Give him everything he needs. Transparency is our policy. After James left, the The four of them looked at me with something between respect and amusement. You just went toe-to-toe with Marcus Levy on your first day, Alex said. He's going to hate you. Will that be a problem? Probably. But it was worth it. He's been running roughshod over operations and finance since the division started, and no one's had the authority to push back. Margaret stood up, gathering her materials. I like you, David. You're direct. We could use more direct around here. The rest of the morning was a blur of introductions, system login, document reviews, and coffee. So much coffee. Sarah, my assistant, turned out to be a cheerful woman in her 20s, who was frighteningly efficient and had already organized my calendar, scheduled follow-up meetings with each team member, and somehow procured my preferred coffee order without me telling her what it was. How did you know I drink black coffee? I asked when she delivered the third cup of the morning. I asked Margaret what she thought you'd drink based on the vibe you gave off. She said, black coffee, no sugar, like a man who's done with everyone's nonsense. Was she right? Disturbingly accurate. She's good at reading people. It's why she's lasted through 3 CFO searches before you. 3. The division is new, but we've had some false starts on leadership. You're number 4. But I have a good feeling about you. She smiled. You stood up to Marcus. The others didn't. At 1 o'clock, James collected me for lunch. We went to a small Italian place 2 blocks from the office, tucked into a side street that looked like it had been there since before the neighborhood got expensive. Owner's a friend, James explained as we were seated at a quiet corner table. Food's excellent, and it's private enough that we can talk business without worrying about who's listening. We ordered pasta for me, risotto for James, and then he pulled out a tablet and opened a presentation. This is where we are, he said, showing me charts and graphs. And this is where I want us to be in 3 years. The gap between current state and goal was significant, ambitious, but not impossible if we executed well. Here's what I need from you, James continued. I need financial discipline. I need accurate forecasting. I need someone who can tell me when we're about to make an expensive mistake, especially if it's a mistake I want to make. He paused. I saw what happened at Hartwell. Richard surrounded himself with these men, and now his company is bleeding. I won't make that mistake. What if I tell you things you don't want to hear? Then I'll listen and we'll discuss it and we'll make a decision together. But I need the truth first. Always the truth. The food arrived. And we ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before James spoke again. How are you doing? Really? That's a lot of change in 2 weeks. Divorce, new job, new city. I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. Good. But if that changes, if you need support, my door is open. We take care of our people here. I believed him. That was the strange part. After 6 years of corporate doublespeak, I actually believed that James Morrison meant what he said. We spent the rest of lunch discussing division strategy, growth targets, and the kind of company culture James wanted to build. It was everything I'd hoped for and nothing I'd experienced at Hartwell. When we got back to the office, there was a flower arrangement on my desk. White lees and blue irises, elegant and expensive. The card read, "Congratulations on your new position. We're watching RH." I stared at it for a long moment, feeling my good mood evaporate. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Those just arrived. Pretty, right? Who's RH? Someone from my past, I said, pulling the card off and tucking it into my desk drawer. Sarah, can you have these sent to the hospital? Donate them to the children's ward or something. Sure, but are you okay? You look like someone just walked over your grave. I'm fine. Just old ghosts. After she left with the flowers, I sat at my desk and pulled up Tom's thumb drive. Time to see exactly how bad the contract situation was. But in the back of my mind, Richard's message echoed. We're watching. Let them watch, I thought. Let them see what happens when you actually value your employees. Let them watch while I built something better than they ever could. 3 weeks into my tenure at Apex, I'd settled into a rhythm that felt almost suspiciously comfortable. My team was responsive and competent. James trusted my judgment. The work was challenging, but not soul-crushing. I had weekends, again, actual weekends, where I didn't check email or feel guilty for existing outside the office. It felt too good to last. I should have known that Richard Hartwell wasn't the type to send flowers and then disappear quietly into the night. Men like him didn't accept defeat. They regrouped. They strategized. And they struck back when you least expected it. The first sign of trouble came on a Thursday morning. I was reviewing cost projections for the new aerospace contract. A legitimate opportunity that would actually make money, unlike the Denison disaster Marcus had saddled us with, when Sarah appeared in my doorway, looking uncharacteristically serious. David, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. Do we have an appointment? No. He just showed up. Says his name is Douglas Brennan and he's a fraud investigator with the SEC. My stomach dropped. The SEC Securities and Exchange Commission. Should I call legal? Yes. And tell Mr. Brennan I'll be with him in a few minutes. After Sarah left, I sat very still, my mind racing through possibilities. The SEC didn't show up at your office for friendly chats. They showed up when they thought something illegal was happening. But what? Apex was a private company. We didn't have publicly traded securities. Unless someone had filed a complaint. Unless someone had suggested that I'd brought proprietary information from Hartwell. Unless Richard had decided to burn me down using federal investigators as his weapon. I picked up my phone and called James. We have a problem, I said when he answered. SEC investigator in the lobby asking to speak with me. There was a pause. I'll be right there. James arrived at my office 30 seconds before the legal team did. Two attorneys I'd met briefly during orientation. Both now looking alert and focused. The lead attorney, Catherine Reeves, was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of calm that came from years of handling crisis. What do we know? She asked. Nothing yet. Just that there's an SEC investigator who wants to talk to me. Don't say anything without me present. In fact, let me do most of the talking. You confirm facts. You don't volunteer information. Understood. Understood. Douglas Brennan was a man in his early 40s with thinning hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many people lie to him. He was waiting in the small conference room, a briefcase on the table in front of him, everything about his posture radiating bureaucratic authority. Mr. Chen, he said, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for seeing me. I'm Douglas Brennan, senior investigator with the Securities and Exchange Commission. He produced credentials that looked official enough to make my palms sweat. This is Catherine Reeves, our general counsel, I said. And James Morrison, our CEO, Brennan nodded at them. I appreciate you making time. I'll try to keep this brief. Mr. Chen, I'm here regarding a complaint filed against you alleging securities fraud and theft of proprietary information. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Who filed the complaint? Catherine asked. Hartwell Industries. Specifically, Richard Hartwell, CEO. Brennan pulled documents from his briefcase. The complaint alleges that Mr. Chen, while employed as senior financial analyst at Hartwell Industries, accessed confidential financial information with intent to use it for personal gain. Further, that upon his termination, he immediately joined a competitor and is currently using that information to harm H. Hartwell's business interests. That's absurd, I said. Catherine put a hand on my arm. Mr. Brennan, my client signed a comprehensive separation agreement with Hartwell Industries that included a non-disclosure agreement. He has not violated that agreement. Furthermore, Hartwell is not a publicly traded company. So, I'm unclear on the SEC's jurisdiction here. Hartwell Industries has publicly traded bonds, Brennan said. And if Mr. Chen had access to material information that could affect the value of those bonds. Information about the company's true financial status, for instance, and he used that information for personal benefit that falls under our jurisdiction. James leaned forward. What exactly is Hartwell alleging David did? Brennan consulted his notes. According to the complaint, Mr. Chen accessed confidential financial projections and shared them with Apex Consolidated prior to his employment here. Specifically, they allege he provided information about Hartwell's contract portfolio that allowed Apex to strategically underbid on several opportunities causing financial harm to Hartwell. That's a lie, I said flatly. David, Catherine warned. No, I'm not sitting here while Richard Hartwell accuses me of crimes I didn't commit. I never shared proprietary information with Apex. Not before I was employed here and not after. Everything I've done has been by the book. Brennan pulled out more papers. Then perhaps you can explain these emails. He slid printouts across the table. I recognized the format immediately. Hartwell Industries' internal email system, but the content made my blood run cold. The first email allegedly from my Hartwell account to James Morrison's Apex account dated 2 weeks before I took my Paris vacation. James attached are the Q3 projections for Hartwell's manufacturing division. As you can see, they're significantly overextended on several contracts. This might be useful for your strategic planning, David. The second email allegedly from me to someone named M. Rodriguez at apexconsolidated.com with a subject line reading Hartwell client list. Marcus, here's the complete client list from Hartwell's distribution network. Should give you some targets for poaching. DC. I stared at the emails, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. I didn't send these, I said. They came from your email account, Brennan said. Then someone else accessed my account. I never sent these emails. I never attached those documents. This is fabricated. Can you prove that? Brennan asked, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. Catherine jumped in. Mr. Brennan, my client is entitled to examine the digital forensics on these emails before responding to allegations based on them. I'd like copies of the full email headers, server logs, and any authentication data. We're still gathering that information from Hartwell's IT department. Then this interview is premature. You're asking my client to respond to allegations supported by evidence he hasn't been allowed to examine. That's not how this works. Brennan nodded, unbothered. That's fair, but I will need to speak with Mr. Chen again once we have complete documentation. In the meantime, I'd advise against any communication with former Hartwell employees or access to Hartwell systems. I don't have access to Hartwell systems. I said I was terminated 3 weeks ago, and yet these emails were sent from your account, which suggests someone else is using my credentials, which means Hartwell has a security problem. Not that I committed fraud. Brennan stood collecting his papers. We'll be in touch. Mr. Chen, I'd strongly advise you to retain criminal counsel. This is a serious matter. After he left, the four of us sat in silence for a long moment. This is Richard, I said finally. This is him trying to destroy me. Can he do this? James asked Catherine. Can he just fabricate evidence and file SEC complaints? If the evidence is fabricated, no. But we'll need to prove it's fabricated, which means forensic analysis of those emails, server logs, authentication records. She looked at me. David, I believe you, but we need to build an airtight case. Did you have any communication with James or anyone at Apex before your employment? Just the conversation in Paris in person. Nothing in writing until after I was fired. Good. We can verify that through James' email records and phone logs. What about your Hartwell email account? Who had access to it? IT department. Obviously, Richard as CEO probably had administrative access to everything. Vanessa might have known my password. We shared passwords sometimes for household accounts. Could she have accessed your work email? I thought about it. Maybe she knew I used the same password for most things. I changed it after the divorce papers were filed. But before that, I trailed off, realizing how careless I'd been. Catherine made notes. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm bringing in a digital forensics expert to analyze those emails. Second, we're going to pull all of your communications records, email, phone, text to prove you had no contact with Apex regarding Hartwell information. Third, we're filing a complaint with the Connecticut Bar about Hartwell's attorneys. If they were involved in fabricating this evidence, what about the SEC investigation? I asked. We cooperate fully. We provide evidence of your innocence, and we make Hartwell look like the bad actors they are. But David, she fixed me with a serious look. You need to tell me right now if there's anything at all that could support their allegations. Even something small, even something you thought was innocent. I can't defend you if I'm blindsided. There's nothing, I said firmly. I never shared confidential information. I never accessed Hartwell systems after my termination. I never even talked to Apex about Hartwell beyond general industry knowledge. What about the analysis you did in Paris? James asked quietly. The folder I gave you about Hartwell's vulnerabilities? My stomach clenched. That was publicly available information. You said so yourself. It was. But if Hartwell is arguing, you had insider knowledge. The folder. I said to Catherine. James gave me a folder in Paris with public analysis of Hartwell Industries, market research, publicly filed financial data, industry reports. I reviewed it and wrote some strategic recommendations for Apex based on that public information. Could they use that against me? Did you add any information that wasn't in the folder? Anything from your time at Hartwell? I thought carefully. I made observations about Hartwell's bidding patterns and operational decisions, but those were based on industry knowledge, not proprietary data. I didn't share client names, contract terms, internal communications, nothing confidential. Catherine nodded slowly. That should be defensible. Industry expertise isn't proprietary. But we'll need to be very careful about how we present this. Brennan is going to try to blur the line between expertise and espionage. So, what do I do? I asked. You do your job. You don't contact anyone at Hartwell. You don't delete any emails or files. You document everything. And you let us handle the legal side. She stood. I'll start working on this immediately. James, I'll need authorization to bring in outside forensics experts. Whatever you need, James said. Blank check. We protect our people. After Catherine left, James and I sat in the conference room, the city sprawling below us through floor-to-ceiling windows. "I'm sorry," I said. "I never meant to bring this kind of trouble to Apex. This isn't your fault. This is Richard Hartwell being exactly who he is, a bully who can't stand losing." James turned to look at me. "Are you okay?" "Honestly, I'm furious. I spent 6 years being loyal to that man, to that company, and this is how he repays me by trying to put me in prison. The SEC complaint probably won't go anywhere. If the emails are fabricated, Brennan will figure that out. And if Hartwell filed a fraudulent complaint, they'll face consequences, will they? Men like Richard don't face consequences. They have lawyers and money and connections. They just win always." "Not always," James said quietly. "I've been competing with Richard for 20 years, remember? And I'm still here, still profitable, still growing. He doesn't always win, David. He just makes you think he does." I wanted to believe him. But the fear was there, cold and tight in my chest. The SEC didn't investigate unless they thought there was something to investigate. And even if I was innocent, which I was, the process itself could destroy me. Legal fees, reputation damage, the suspicion that would follow me even after I was cleared. Richard knew that. That's why he'd done it. Not because he thought I'd actually go to prison, but because he knew the investigation itself was punishment. "I need to see those emails." I said the full versions, not just Brennan's printouts. If they're fabricated, there will be evidence in the metadata. Catherine will get them. Trust her, she's the best. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, trying to focus on work while my mind spiraled through worst-case scenarios. Tom brought me the updated contract analysis. Alex presented revised revenue projections. Margaret asked about the software implementation timeline. I gave answers, made decisions, did my job on autopilot while internally I was screaming. At 6 o'clock, Sarah knocked on my door. "David, you have a visitor. She says she's your ex-sister-in-law." I looked up confused. "What? Emily Hartwell?" "She says it's important." Emily, Vanessa's younger sister. I'd always liked Emily. She was the only member of the Hartwell family who'd ever treated me like a person instead of an employee. She'd been away at graduate school for most of my marriage, studying environmental policy at Berkeley, and we'd only seen each other at holidays and family events. "Send her in," I said, curious. Emily looked different than I remembered. Her hair was shorter, her clothes more professional, but she still had that same direct gaze that had always made her seem older than her 26 years. "David," she said, closing the door behind her. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced. But I need to talk to you about my father. If this is about the SEC complaint, it's not. I mean, it is, but not the way you think." She sat down across from my desk, her hands clasped tightly. "Those emails, the ones the investigator showed you, they're fake. Dad had them created." The room seemed to tilt. "You know this for certain." "I was there when he talked to his IT guy about it. I wasn't supposed to hear I was visiting home last weekend. And I came down for water late at night. Dad and this guy, Brandon, were in his study. I heard Dad say, 'I need emails that look like they came from Chen's account. Can you do that?' And Brandon said, 'Yes.'" My hands were shaking. "Emily, do you understand what you're telling me? Your father fabricated evidence to file a federal complaint against me. That's a crime. I know. That's why I'm here. What he's doing is wrong, David. I don't care that you left the company or that you're working for Apex. You don't deserve to be railroaded like this. Why are you helping me? I'm not family anymore." She smiled sadly. "You never really were family to them, but you were always kind to me. You remembered my birthday. You asked about my research. You treated me like a person." She pulled a thumb drive from her bag. "This has voice recordings from that night. I recorded the conversation on my phone through the door. It's not perfect, but you can hear Dad talking about fabricating the emails." I stared at the thumb drive like it was a live grenade. "Emily, if you give this to me, your father will know you betrayed him. I know he'll cut you off financially, emotionally. You'll lose everything. I'll lose his money. I won't lose everything." She pushed the thumb drive across my desk. "I have my own life, my own career. I don't need Hartwell money and I don't need to be part of a family that does this to people." I picked up the thumb drive. Felt its weight. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means. Just promise me you'll use it. Don't let him win. He's been bullying people my entire life and everyone just takes it because he has money and power. But you don't have to take it. You have proof now." After Emily left, I sat alone in my office holding the thumb drive, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Then I called Catherine Reeves. "I have evidence," I said when she answered. "Evidence that Richard Hartwell fabricated those emails. And you're not going to believe how I got it. Catherine Reeves listened to the recording 3 times. Her expression growing more grim with each playthrough. We were in a secure conference room at Apex. She'd insisted on bringing her full legal team, plus the digital forensics expert she'd hired, a thin man named Dr. Marcus Webb, who looked like he'd never seen sunlight, but could probably hack into Fort Knox given enough Mountain Dew. Richard's voice crackled through the speakers. Tiny, but unmistakable. I need emails that look like they came from Chen's account. Can you do that? Brandon's response. Yeah, I can backdate them in the system. Make it look like they were sent before he left. But Mr. Hart. Well, if anyone does a real forensic analysis, they won't. The SEC doesn't have the resources to dig that deep on a complaint like this. They'll see the emails, talk to Chen, and even if they don't charge him, the investigation alone will destroy his reputation. That's all I need. Junis, there was a pause. Then Brandon again, what about the content? You want me to write the emails? I'll draft them. You just make them look authentic. And Brandon. This conversation never happened. Understood, sir. The recording ended. Emily had captured almost 4 minutes of conversation. Muffled, but clear enough to be damning. This is gold, Catherine said quietly. This is Richard Hartwell admitting to fabricating evidence for a federal complaint. That's obstruction of justice, wire fraud, potentially conspiracy charges. Can we use it? I asked. Emily recorded it without her father's knowledge. Is that legal? Dr. Webb looked up from his laptop where he'd been analyzing the audio file. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as Emily was present during the conversation, even if the other parties didn't know she was there or that she was recording, it's admissible. But she recorded through a door. I said she wasn't technically part of the conversation. Doesn't matter. Catherine said she was in a place she had legal right to be her family's home. She overheard a conversation that she then chose to record. That's legal. The question isn't admissibility. It's what we do with it. We give it to the SEC, I said immediately. Eventually, yes, but we need to be strategic here. Catherine pulled up a document on her tablet. Right now, the SEC is investigating you based on Hartwell's complaint. If we immediately produce evidence that Hartwell fabricated the complaint, several things happen. 1. The investigation shifts focus to Hartwell. 2. Richard knows someone inside his organization betrayed him. 3. He goes into full defensive mode and probably destroys any other evidence. You want to wait? I couldn't keep the frustration from my voice. I want to build an airtight case. Dr. Webb, how long do you need to analyze those emails Brennan showed us? If I can get the actual email files with full headers and metadata, not just printouts, 2 days, maybe 3. Get them. File a motion if you have to, but get the complete email data. Catherine turned back to me. Here's what's going to happen. Dr. Webb will prove those emails are fabricated through digital forensics. We'll have technical evidence and testimonial evidence. Emily's recording. Then we go to the SEC with everything at once. We don't just defend you. We bury Richard Hartwell. James, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. What's Emily's exposure in this? If Richard finds out she's the source. That's why we need to move quickly. Catherine said once we hand this over to the SEC, Emily will need legal protection, whistleblower status, possibly a restraining order. If Richard retaliates, I can help arrange that. I'll cover her legal fees. I said whatever she needs. She risked everything to help me. Generous, but let's see what happens first. She may not need much. Whistleblowers in federal cases often get considerable protection. Catherine closed her tablet. For now, David, you continue business as usual. Don't contact Emily. Don't contact anyone at Hartwell. Don't do anything that could be construed as retaliation or witness tampering. Let us handle this through proper channels. How long? I asked. 1 week, maybe 2. Dr. Webb does his analysis. We package everything together and we present it to Brennan with a formal complaint against Hartwell Industries for filing a fraudulent SEC claim. It felt like an eternity, but I nodded. Okay, 1 week. The next 7 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions at work, reviewed budgets, attended meetings, worked with Tom on fixing the contract pricing issues that Marcus had created. But the whole time, my mind was on that thumb drive, on Emily's recording, on Richard's voice admitting he was trying to destroy me. At night, alone in my Hell's Kitchen apartment, I'd pull up the recording and listen to it again. Not because I needed to. I had every word memorized, but because it was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that Richard Hartwell was exactly as terrible as I'd thought. Proof that leaving had been the right decision, even if it had led me here to this moment of legal limbo. On the third day, Dr. Webb called with preliminary findings. The emails are definitely fabricated, he said, his voice crackling through my phone. I got the full email files from the SEC. They were surprisingly cooperative once Catherine explained we were cooperating with the investigation. The metadata is all wrong. The timestamps don't match the server logs. The IP address shows the emails originated from Hartwell's headquarters, not from any device you had access to. And this is the good part. They were created using administrative privileges in the email system, then backdated to look like they were sent earlier. Can you prove that definitively? I can prove it in a way that would hold up in federal court. The digital fingerprints are all over this thing. Whoever did it, this Brandon guy from the recording, he's competent enough to fool a casual observer, but not competent enough to fool a real forensic analysis. He left traces everywhere. How soon can you have a full report? 2 days. I want to be thorough, but Catherine should know. This is slam dunk evidence. Richard Hartwell is going down for this. I called Emily from a burner phone I'd bought specifically for this purpose. Catherine's advice to avoid creating any traceable communication. It's David, I said when she answered. I can't talk long, but I wanted you to know the recording you gave me. It's working. The forensics expert confirmed the emails are fake. We're going to the SEC within a week. There was a long pause. I'm scared, David. I know, but Catherine Reeves, my lawyer, she's going to help protect you. Whistleblower status, legal protection, everything you need. It's not legal protection I'm worried about. It's my family. My mother called yesterday. She knows something is wrong. She kept asking why I'd been at the house. What I was doing up so late. I think Dad suspects. My blood ran cold. Has he said anything directly? No. But Vanessa called, too. She never calls. She asked if I'd been in touch with you. What did you say? I said no. But she didn't believe me. She said Dad was dealing with a situation and that I should stay out of it. That family loyalty mattered. Emily's voice cracked. David, I don't know if I can do this. If they find out it was me, they won't. Not until we go to the SEC. And by then, you'll have legal protection. I promise, Emily. I won't let him hurt you. He's my father. I know. But what he's doing is wrong. You know that. That's why you came to me. Another long pause then. Okay. But David, when this is over, I don't think I can go back to the family. I mean, this is going to break everything. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've been looking for an excuse to leave for years. You just gave me a good one. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and thought about families. The ones you're born into and the ones you choose. The Hartwells had been my family for 6 years, and they discarded me the moment I stopped being useful. Emily was choosing to leave that family, to blow it up from the inside, because she believed in doing the right thing. I hoped that counted for something. I hoped it would be enough when everything came crashing down. On day 6, Catherine called an emergency meeting. Brennan wants to meet again. She said, tomorrow. He says he has new evidence. My stomach dropped. What kind of evidence? He didn't say. But David, I need you to trust me here. We go in, we listen. We don't volunteer anything. Dr. Webb's report will be ready by tonight. We're almost there. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. at the SEC's New York field office, a nondescript building in Lower Manhattan that looked like every other federal office building. All security checkpoints and fluorescent lighting and the particular smell of government bureaucracy. Brennan met us in a conference room with another investigator, a woman named Sandra Pacheco, who introduced herself as his supervisor. That was the first warning sign supervisors didn't attend routine interviews. Mr. Chen, thank you for coming in, Brennan said, his tone more formal than it had been during his office visit. This is Supervisory Agent Pacheco. She's taken an interest in your case. Why? Catherine asked bluntly. Pacheco smiled slightly. Because it's gotten complicated. Mr. Chen, we've completed our preliminary analysis of the emails that formed the basis of Hartwell Industries' complaint against you. I kept my expression neutral, but my heart was racing. And Catherine prompted, and we've found significant irregularities. The emails appear to have been created after the dates they claim to have been sent. The metadata doesn't match the content. The IP addresses are inconsistent with Mr. Chen's known devices and locations. Pacheco slid a folder across the table. In short, we believe these emails were fabricated. Catherine and I exchanged the briefest glance. She'd been right. The SEC had figured it out on their own. That's what we've been trying to tell you, I said carefully. We know, and we owe you an apology for the inconvenience of this investigation. Pacheco's tone was professional, but there was something else underneath anger. Maybe or disgust. However, this raises a more serious question. Who fabricated these emails and why? That's obvious, isn't it? I said. Richard Hartwell filed the complaint. Richard Hartwell provided the emails. They came from Hartwell Industries' email system. We're aware, which is why we're now opening a criminal investigation into Hartwell Industries for filing a false complaint, fabricating evidence, and obstruction of justice. Pacheco leaned forward. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you directly. Do you have any information about how these emails were created? Any knowledge of who at Hartwell might have been involved? This was it. The moment we'd been waiting for. Catherine spoke before I could. Agent Pacheco, before my client answers that, I need certain assurances. If Mr. Chen provides you with evidence regarding the fabrication of these emails, evidence that leads to criminal charges against Hartwell Industries, will he be protected from any retaliation? He's already protected as a complainant in a federal investigation. If he becomes a witness in a criminal case, those protections expand considerably. And what about other witnesses? If there are individuals at Hartwell who can provide testimony about the fabrication, what protections can you offer them in the fabrication? One pretty sense, Pacheco's eyes sharpened. We have a robust whistleblower protection program. Anyone who comes forward with evidence of corporate fraud receives protection from retaliation and in some cases financial rewards if their information leads to successful prosecution or settlement. Catherine pulled out a flash drive, not Emily's original, but a copy Dr. Webb had made and certified. Agent Pacheco, my client has come into possession of a recording made by a member of the Hartwell family. In this recording, Richard Hartwell explicitly discusses fabricating emails to frame my client. We also have a comprehensive forensic analysis of the emails in question prepared by Dr. Marcus Webb, a certified digital forensics expert. We're prepared to provide both pieces of evidence along with testimony from my client and the individual who made the recording in exchange for full immunity for Mr. Chen and whistleblower protection for the source. Brennan and Pacheco looked at each other. Something passed between them. Surprise, interest, maybe excitement. This had just become a much bigger case. Let me hear the recording, Pacheco said. Catherine plugged in the flash drive and pulled up the audio file. Richard's voice filled the conference room, talking casually about fabricating federal evidence like he was ordering lunch. By the time it finished, Pacheco's jaw was tight. Who made this recording? She asked. Emily Hartwell, Richard Hartwell's younger daughter. She overheard the conversation and recorded it. She came to my client because she believed what her father was doing was wrong. Where is she now? Safe and willing to testify, provided she receives appropriate protection. Pacheco stood up, started pacing. This is significant. If we can corroborate this recording with the forensic evidence, we have a case for multiple felonies, conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, filing false statements to a federal agency. She turned to Brennan. Get legal on the phone. We need witness protection agreements drafted immediately. What about my client? Catherine asked. Your client is no longer under investigation. As of right now, he's a witness. And Miss Hartwell, assuming her testimony holds up, will be treated as a whistleblower with full protections. Pacheco sat back down, her demeanor completely changed. Mr. Chen, I need you to tell me everything. Every interaction with Richard Hartwell, every detail about your employment at Hartwell Industries, everything that led up to this moment. Don't leave anything out. So, I told her all of it. The 6 years of overwork and underpay. The vacation Richard had approved and then used as an excuse to fire me. The separation agreement and the divorce. The suspicious life insurance policy that had been increased right before I was sent on increasingly dangerous site visits. The flowers with the threatening note. Everything. Catherine stopped me when I got to the life insurance policy. Wait, go back to that $15 million policy increased from $2 million 8 months before you were terminated. Yes, I found out when I was reviewing Hartwell's financial documents in Paris. James had given me public analysis and I noticed the disclosure about Keyman insurance policies and their bond offering documents. Pacheco and Brennan exchanged looks again. Mr. Chen, Pacheco said carefully. If Richard Hartwell substantially increased your life insurance policy and then began placing you in increasingly dangerous situations, that could suggest attempted murder, Catherine finished. Or at minimum, reckless endangerment. My hands were shaking. Hearing someone else say it, hearing a federal agent acknowledge that my paranoia might have been justified made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Do you have documentation of these site visits? Brennan asked. Emails assigning you to inspect facilities, visit warehouses, that kind of thing. I might. I'd have to check my old email archives. Check them. And Mr. Chen, don't go anywhere alone until we've talked to Richard Hartwell. If he's desperate enough to fabricate federal evidence, he's desperate enough to do something much worse. We left the SEC office 2 hours later with immunity agreements for me, whistleblower protection for Emily, and an active criminal investigation into Richard Hartwell and Hartwell Industries. In the car back to Apex, Catherine was on her phone coordinating with Emily's new legal team. I sat in the back seat watching New York slide past the windows, feeling like I was in someone else's life. "David," Catherine said when she'd finished her call. "You did good today. You and Emily, you stood up to a bully and you're going to win. It doesn't feel like winning yet. It will. When the indictments come down, when Richard Hartwell is arrested, when the truth comes out and everyone knows what he did, that's when it will feel like winning." I wanted to believe her, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of being afraid. My phone buzzed. A text from James. Catherine filled me in. "Take the rest of the week off. Seriously, rest. You've earned it." Another text. This one from an unknown number. "It's Emily. New phone. They're moving me to a safe house until the investigation is complete. Thank you for believing me and for protecting me."
I replied, "Thank you for being brave enough to do the right thing.
Stay safe." That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, not expensive Paris wine, just a decent Pinot Noir from the bodega down the street, and I thought about justice. For 6 years, I'd believed that working hard and being loyal would be enough. That Richard Hartwell would eventually see my value and reward it. That the system was fair, that good things happen to good people, that patience was a virtue. I'd been wrong about all of it. The system wasn't fair. Good things didn't happen to good people. Good things happened to people who fought for them. And patience wasn't a virtue. It was just another word for accepting less than you deserved. Richard Hartwell was about to learn that lesson the hard way and I was going to watch him fall. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. 3 weeks after my meeting with the SEC, I was in my office reviewing quarterly projections with Alex when Sarah burst through the door without knocking, a first for her, which told me immediately that something major had happened. "Turn on CNBC," she said, already grabbing the remote for the television mounted on my wall. "Right now." The screen flickered to life, showing a news anchor with the kind of serious expression reserved for market crashes and CEO arrests. Behind her, a chyron scrolled across the bottom. Breaking. Manufacturing CEO arrested on federal fraud charges. Richard Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, was taken into custody this morning by FBI agents at the company's Connecticut headquarters. Federal prosecutors have charged Hartwell with conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and filing false statements to the Securities and Exchange Commission. According to the indictment, Hartwell allegedly fabricated emails to frame a former employee in an attempt to damage that employee's career and harm a competitor. Alex let out a low whistle. Holy, the footage cut to shaky cell phone video of Richard being walked out of the Hartwell Industries building in handcuffs. FBI agents on either side of him. His face was red, his mouth moving, probably yelling, though there was no audio. Behind him, I could see employees watching from the windows, their expressions shocked. Joining us now is legal analyst Jennifer Kwan. Jennifer, how serious are these charges? Very serious, Tom. We're talking about multiple federal felonies here. Conspiracy to commit fraud carries up to 5 years in prison. Obstruction of justice, another 5 years. Filing false statements to a federal agency. Another 5. If convicted on all counts, Richard Hartwell could be looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. My phone started ringing. James, then Catherine, then a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Sarah muted the TV. "I'm guessing you knew this was coming." I knew it was possible. I didn't know it would be today. The phones are going crazy. Every business reporter in New York wants a statement. What should I tell them? Tell them no comment for now. Root everything to Catherine Reeves. After Sarah left, I sat down heavily in my chair. Alex was still staring at the television where they were now showing old footage of Richard at industry conferences, smiling and confident. The very picture of success. "That's your father-in-law," Alex said. "Your ex-father-in-law, I mean." "Yes. And he tried to frame you for securities fraud." "Yes." "Jesus. David, why didn't you tell us?" "Because it was being handled and because I didn't want to be defined by it." I looked at him. "I'm the CFO of Apex Manufacturing Division. That's what matters. Not Richard Hartwell's crimes." Still, Alex shook his head. "This is going to be everywhere. Every trade publication, every business news site, Hartwell Industries is going to be in free fall." He was right. By noon, the story had exploded across every platform. Bloomberg, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal, all running variations of the same headline. Manufacturing CEO arrested and fraud scheme targeting former employee. Some outlets had already connected the dots. I saw my name in several articles. Sources indicate the former employee in question is David Chen, who left Hartwell Industries in September and is now CFO of Apex Consolidated's manufacturing division. My phone kept ringing. I ignored most of it, but I took Catherine's call. "Have you seen the news?" she asked. "Hard to miss it. The U Attorney's Office will be making a formal statement this afternoon. They'll lay out the charges in detail. You should know they're also charging Brandon Keller, Hartwell's IT director, as a co-conspirator. He's already cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence." "What about Emily? Safe?" "The whistleblower protection is holding. Her name hasn't been mentioned in any public filings, and it won't be unless she chooses to go public. Right now, she's the SEC's star witness, and they're keeping her identity sealed." "Has Richard said anything?" His lawyer issued a statement calling the charges baseless political persecution and insisting he'll be vindicated. Standard stuff. But David, the evidence is overwhelming. The recording, the forensic analysis, Brandon's testimony. The prosecutor told me this morning they have him dead to rights. When's the trial? Probably not for months. These things take time, but the arraignment is tomorrow. He's being held without bail because the prosecutor argued he's a flight risk. He has significant assets and international business connections. The idea of Richard Hartwell spending the night in jail was almost impossible to imagine. He was a man who stayed in 5-star hotels and flew first class. The closest he'd come to roughing it was probably business class on a transatlantic flight. "How are you doing?" Catherine asked. "Really? I don't know. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I just feel tired. That's normal. This has been a lot. But David, you won. He tried to destroy you, and instead he destroyed himself. That means something. After we hung up, I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every few minutes, Sarah would buzz to tell me about another call, another reporter, another request for comment. Finally, at 2 o'clock, James appeared in my doorway. "Walk with me," he said. We took the elevator down to the ground floor and walked out into the crisp November air. James led us to a small park 2 blocks from the office, one of those pocket green spaces, Manhattan, sprinkled between buildings like an afterthought. "You're handling this well," he said as we sat on a bench. "I'm pretending to handle it well. There's a difference." "Fair enough. Listen, I want you to know that Apex is your back on this. Whatever you need, media training, security, legal support, it's yours. We don't abandon our people when things get complicated. I appreciate that, but I also need to know, are you okay to keep working? Because if you need time, if this is too much, I want to work." I interrupted. "I need to work. If I sit at home thinking about this, I'll go crazy. At least here I have something productive to focus on." James nodded. "Okay, but the offer stands. Doors always open." We sat in silence for a moment, watching pigeons squabble over a discarded sandwich. "You know what the irony is?" I said. "I never wanted revenge. I just wanted to be left alone. I wanted to do my job, build a career, move on with my life. Richard's the one who couldn't let it go. Men like Richard never can. They see everything as a competition. Everyone is either a threat or a tool. You stopped being useful, so you became a threat. It's that simple to them. What happens to Hartwell Industries now? Chaos, probably. Board will likely force Richard out. Even if he's not convicted, the optics are too damaging. They'll bring in a crisis management team, try to steady the ship. Some of their clients will leave. Stock price will tank. It'll be ugly." "Good," I said, and meant it. That evening, I went back to my apartment and found a package waiting outside my door. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. Vanessa's handwriting. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a jewelry box and a letter. The jewelry box contained my wedding ring, the simple gold band I'd left on the bathroom counter the day I'd moved out. I'd wondered what happened to it. Apparently, Vanessa had kept it. The letter was written on expensive cream stationery, the kind she'd always used for thank you notes and formal correspondence. "David, I'm writing this because I don't have the courage to say it to your face. I'm sorry for all of it. For how my family treated you, for how I treated you, for not standing up for you when it mattered. I knew about the emails. Not before Dad had them created, but after. He told me what he'd done. Told me it was necessary to protect the company, to protect our family. And I didn't stop him. I should have. I should have gone to you, warned you, done something. Instead, I stayed silent because that's what we H. Hartwells do. We protect the family no matter who gets hurt. I saw the news this morning. I saw Dad being arrested and I felt relief. Not sadness, not anger, relief. Because maybe now he'll finally face consequences for the things he's done. Not just to you, but to so many others over the years. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it. I just wanted you to know that you were right to leave. Right to stand up for yourself. Right to refuse to be small so we could feel big. I hope you're happy at Apex. I hope you found what you were looking for. I'm sorry it took me this long to see what you saw all along, that my family is broken. And I was too scared to admit it, Vanessa. I read the letter 3 times, looking for sarcasm or manipulation, but found only honesty. It was perhaps the most genuine thing Vanessa had ever said to me. I put the ring back in the box and set it on a shelf in my closet. Maybe someday I'd throw it away. Maybe I'd sell it. For now, it could stay there, a reminder of the man I used to be and the life I'd escaped. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing with news alerts. Richard's arraignment was happening at 10 a.m. and apparently, the media circus was already in full swing outside the federal courthouse. I wasn't planning to go. What would be the point? But at 9:30, Catherine called. I'm at the courthouse. She said Emily's here. She wants to see you. Is that safe? If Richard sees her, he won't. She's in a secure witness area. But David, she's scared. She asked if you could come. You don't have to, but I'll be there in 20 minutes. I told Sarah to cancel my morning meetings, grabbed my coat, and caught a cab to the courthouse. The scene outside was exactly what I'd expected. News vans, reporters with microphones, protesters with signs I couldn't read from the cab. Catherine met me at a side entrance and led me through security to a small room on the 3rd floor. Emily was sitting at a table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw me, she stood up. David, thank you for coming. Of course. How are you holding up? I'm terrified. The prosecutor keeps telling me I did the right thing, that I'm protected, that everything will be okay, but my mother won't speak to me. Vanessa sent me a text calling me a traitor. Thomas, he's the only one who's been decent. He said he understood why I did it, but that I couldn't come to any family events anymore because it would upset Dad. I wanted to say something comforting, but what could I say? She'd burned her family to the ground to do the right thing. There were consequences to that, and platitudes wouldn't make them hurt less. I'm sorry, I said instead. I know this is hard, but you saved my life, Emily. If you hadn't come forward, Richard would have destroyed me. Maybe literally. So, whatever happens, whatever you lose, you did the right thing. Did I? Because right now, it feels like I just blew up my entire life for nothing. Not for nothing. For justice, for truth, for the principle that powerful people shouldn't get away with destroying others just because they can. I sat down across from her. Your father tried to frame me for federal crimes. He increased my life insurance policy and sent me into dangerous situations. He fabricated evidence and filed false complaints. That's not family loyalty. That's criminal behavior. And you stopped him. Emily's eyes filled with tears. He's still my father. I know. And that makes what you did even braver. Catherine knocked on the door frame. They're bringing Richard in. Arraignment starts in 5 minutes. Emily, you don't have to watch if you don't want to. I do, Emily said, wiping her eyes. I need to see it. I need to know this is real. We went to the gallery, Catherine, Emily, and me. The courtroom was packed with reporters, Hartwell Industries employees, and curious onlookers. I recognized some faces from my time at the company. Jennifer, Richard's assistant, sitting in the back row looking shell-shocked. Marcus, the security guard, who nodded at me solemnly. A few board members I'd presented to over the years, all looking grim. And then they brought Richard in. He was wearing the same suit from yesterday, slightly rumpled now, without a tie. His hands were cuffed in front of him. His face was drawn, his famous confidence nowhere in evidence. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, almost fragile. The judge entered and we all stood. The arraignment proceeded with bureaucratic efficiency. Charges read, plea entered, not guilty. Bail arguments heard and denied. Richard's lawyer, an expensive suit from a white shoe Manhattan firm, argued passionately for house arrest with electronic monitoring. The prosecutor countered that Richard had the means and motive to flee the country. The judge sided with the prosecutor. Richard Hartwell would remain in federal custody pending trial. I watched Richard's face as the judge made her ruling. For just a moment, his mask slipped and I saw genuine fear. He was going to spend months in jail, maybe years, maybe the rest of his life, and he'd done it to himself. When they let him out of the courtroom, he looked up at the gallery. His eyes swept across the crowd and landed on Emily. Recognition flashed across his face, then shock, then rage. He knew. Somehow he knew it had been her. Emily grabbed my hand, her grip tight enough to hurt, but she didn't look away. She stared at her father, and her father stared back. And in that moment, something broke between them that could never be repaired. Then he was gone. Back through the door that led to the holding cells. We left the courtroom in silence. Outside, the reporters were shouting questions, but Catherine steered us away through a back corridor and out to a waiting car. "It's done," Catherine said once we were safely inside. "He's in custody. The trial will take months, but the evidence is solid. He's going to prison, David. It's over." But it didn't feel over. It felt like the beginning of something else, something I didn't have a name for yet. Emily leaned her head against the window. "I need to leave Connecticut. I can't stay here anymore. Everyone knows what I did. Everyone hates me." "Not everyone," I said. "I don't. Catherine doesn't. And there are people out there who are going to see you as a hero for standing up to corruption." "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like an orphan." I didn't have an answer for that. Some losses couldn't be fixed with words. Catherine dropped me back at Apex and I went up to my office in a daze. The television was still on, muted, showing footage of the courthouse. My phone had 43 missed calls. James appeared in my doorway. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly. "But I will be good. Because we have a company to run and I need my CFO focused." "Think you can do that?" I looked around my office at the desk with my name on it at the windows overlooking Manhattan at the work waiting for me that had nothing to do with Richard Hartwell or revenge or justice. "Yeah," I said, "I can do that." And for the first time since the phone call in Paris, I believed it. 3 months after Richard's arrest, Hartwell Industries filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. I read about it in the Wall Street Journal over coffee on a Sunday morning, sitting in my apartment with winter sunlight streaming through the windows. The article was clinical in its assessment: over-leveraged contracts, mounting legal fees from the criminal case, loss of key clients who didn't want to be associated with the scandal. The board had forced Richard to resign from his CEO position 2 weeks after his arrest. But by then, the damage was done. Major accounts had fled. Credit lines had dried up. Vendors demanded cash up front instead of extending terms. The company my ex-wife's family had built over 3 generations was collapsing, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, just a distant curiosity, like reading about a natural disaster in a country I'd never visited. The bankruptcy filing includes plans to sell off several divisions, the article continued. Industry analysts suggest that Apex Consolidated may be positioned to acquire some of Hartwell's more profitable assets at significant discount. My phone rang. "James, tell me you're reading the journal," he said without preamble. "I'm reading the journal. The Hartwell bankruptcy, their manufacturing division, the one we compete with directly. It's going to be part of the asset sale. I want it." I sat down my coffee. "You want to buy pieces of Hartwell Industries, not pieces, the best pieces. Their flagship manufacturing facility in New Britain is state-of-the-art. Their client list in the aerospace sector is exactly what we need to scale our division. And with the bankruptcy, we can get it all for probably 60 cents on the dollar. James, the optics are that we're a smart company making a smart acquisition. Hartwell's creditors want to get paid. Their employees want to keep their jobs. We can provide both. This isn't revenge, David. This is business." But it felt like revenge. It felt like standing over the corpse of my former life and picking through the pieces that still had value. "I need you to do the financial analysis," James continued. "What's it worth? What can we pay and still maintain healthy margins? What's the integration cost? I want a complete picture before we make a bid. When board meeting is in 2 weeks. I want to present this as a done deal. Not a possibility. Can you do it?" I looked at the article again, at the photo of the Hartwell Industries building where I'd spent 6 years of my life. At the employees quoted as saying they were hopeful someone would buy the company and save their jobs. People like Jennifer, like Marcus the security guard, like the analysts I'd trained and the accountants I'd worked with. They didn't deserve to lose their jobs because Richard Hartwell was a criminal. "I can do it," I said. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "If we acquire the division, we honor the existing employment contracts. No mass layoffs, no gutting the workforce to reduce costs. These people didn't do anything wrong. They don't deserve to be punished because their CEO was a criminal." There was a pause. "Agreed. Anything else?" "I don't want to be the face of this acquisition. Put someone else in charge of the integration. I'll do the analysis. I'll advise on strategy, but I'm not walking into that building as the conquering hero. It's too complicated." "Also agreed. Though, for the record, you wouldn't be the conquering hero. You'd be the guy who's giving them a future. After we hung up, I spent the rest of Sunday pulling together every piece of public information I could find on Hartwell Industries' manufacturing division. Financial statements from their bond offerings, industry reports on their market position, news articles about their contracts and clients. By midnight, I had a preliminary assessment. The division was worth somewhere between $40 and $60 million as a going concern. But in bankruptcy, with the taint of scandal and the pressure to liquidate quickly, we could probably acquire it for $35 million. It was a steal. It was also deeply strange to be putting a price tag on a piece of my former life. Monday morning, I assembled my team, Margaret, Alex, Tom, and Patricia, and laid out the project. We're conducting acquisition due diligence on Hartwell Industries' manufacturing division. I said, I need complete financial analysis, profitability by product line, customer concentration risk, contract portfolio review, integration cost estimates. We have 2 weeks. Tom's eyes went wide. Hartwell, your former employer, Hartwell, the same. Are we? Is this? Alex struggled for words. Is this weird for you? Extremely, but it's also good business. So, let's focus on the business part and try to ignore the weird part. We dove in. The bankruptcy court had made Hartwell's financial records public as part of the filing, which meant we had access to data I'd never been allowed to see when I actually worked there. Detailed profit and loss statements by division, complete customer lists, contract terms and schedules, equipment inventories, employee compensation data. It was like performing an autopsy on something that was still technically alive but dying. Jesus, Margaret said on day 3, looking at a spreadsheet of contract margins. They were losing money on almost everything. How did they stay in business this long? Creative accounting, I said, and Richard's willingness to lie to the board about actual performance. They kept winning new contracts to generate cash flow, but each contract lost money, so they needed more contracts to cover the losses. Classic death spiral, except for the aerospace division, Tom noted. That's actually profitable. Good margins, solid contracts, excellent equipment. If we stripped away everything else and just bought this piece, that's exactly what we're going to do. I said James wants the aerospace division, not the whole mess. We let someone else buy the money-losing pieces. The work was intense but straightforward. Unlike the chaos at Hartwell, where I'd been constantly fighting for resources and authority, at Apex, I had everything I needed. A competent team, adequate time, access to information. It was a reminder of how much easier work was when people actually wanted you to succeed. On day 7, Catherine Reeves called with an update on Richard's case. Trial date is set. She said June 15th. The prosecutor is pushing for a speedy trial and Richard's legal team couldn't get it delayed any longer. Also, there's been a development with Emily. My stomach tightened. What kind of development? She's going public. There's going to be a 60 Minutes interview airing next Sunday. She's going to talk about why she came forward, what she witnessed, what it cost her. The producer reached out to me for comment. They want to interview you, too. Absolutely not. That's what I told them. But David, you should know this is going to bring everything back into the spotlight. Emily's brave for doing this, but it means more media attention, more questions, more scrutiny. Is she safe? If she goes public, she has security. The FBI is taking threats seriously, especially given Richard's resources and connections, but she feels like she needs to do this. She wants people to understand why she made the choice she made. I thought about Emily in that courthouse, watching her father being led away in handcuffs, about the text from Vanessa calling her a traitor, about how she'd said she felt like an orphan. She's trying to take back the narrative. I said, exactly. Instead of being the daughter who betrayed her family, she's the whistleblower who stood up to corruption. It's smart, actually. Difficult, but smart. Sunday night, I watched the 60 Minutes interview alone in my apartment. Emily looked different, older somehow. Though it had only been a few months, she sat in a nondescript room, hands folded in her lap, and told her story with a quiet dignity that made my chest ache. People ask me how I could betray my own father, she said to the interviewer. But what he was doing, fabricating evidence, trying to destroy someone's life, that's the real betrayal. He betrayed every principle he claimed to believe in. Family values, integrity, honesty. Those were just words to him. Words he used to control people. You knew that coming forward would cost you your relationship with your family, the interviewer prompted. I did, and it has. My mother won't speak to me. My sister sent me one text message in 3 months, and it was to tell me I was dead to her. My brother tries, but he's caught between loyalty to them and I don't know, maybe basic human decency. Emily's voice cracked slightly, but I had to ask myself, what kind of person would I be if I stayed silent? If I knew my father was trying to send an innocent man to prison and I did nothing. David Chen, your father's former employee. You knew him? I knew him. He was always kind to me. Remembered my birthday. Asked about my studies. Treated me like a person instead of a prop. That shouldn't be remarkable, but in my family, it was. She looked directly at the camera. David didn't deserve what my father tried to do to him, and I wasn't going to be complicit in that destruction. The interview went on for another 10 minutes with Emily describing the recording, the decision to come forward, the aftermath. She was articulate and composed, but I could see the cost in her eyes. The grief of losing her family. The fear of what came next. The loneliness of having made an impossible choice. When it ended, my phone immediately started buzzing. James telling me the interview was powerful. Catherine checking if I was okay. Sarah sending a simple message. Your ex-sister-in-law is brave as hell. And then, surprisingly, a text from Vanessa. I watched the interview. Emily's right. I'm sorry I called her a traitor. I'm sorry for a lot of things. I hope you're well. I stared at that message for a long time before responding. I hope you're well, too. Take care of yourself. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something in acknowledgement that we'd both been trapped in the same toxic system, and we'd both found different ways to escape. The next morning at work, the Hartwell acquisition analysis was ready. I'd compiled everything into a comprehensive presentation. Current state assessment, valuation analysis, integration plan, risk factors, financial projections. The aerospace division was worth acquiring at the right price. Everything else was a dumpster fire we should avoid. James reviewed it in his office, nodding as he flipped through the slides. This is excellent work, he said. Exactly what I needed. Board meeting is Thursday. I'll present this, and if they approve, we'll submit a bid by end of week. What if Hartwell's board rejects our bid? There's bad blood there. They're in bankruptcy. They don't get to reject good faith offers based on personal feelings. The bankruptcy trustee will evaluate all bids based on value and likelihood of closing. We'll be competitive on both fronts. What about Richard? Even from jail, he might try to interfere. Richard doesn't get a vote anymore. He resigned as CEO and the board stripped his voting rights as part of the settlement with creditors. He's a defendant in a criminal case, nothing more. James closed the presentation. This is going to happen, David. And when it does, you're going to have saved dozens of jobs and built our division into a real powerhouse. That's something to be proud of. I wanted to feel proud. Instead, I felt like a scavenger picking over bones. Thursday's board meeting lasted 3 hours. James called me afterward with the news. Unanimous approval to bid $38 million for the aerospace division with employment guarantees for existing staff and a 90-day integration timeline. We're doing this, he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. We submit the bid tomorrow morning. If all goes well, we'll own it by end of March. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about walking into that New Britain facility as part of Apex, about seeing Jennifer and Marcus and all the people who used to be my colleagues, about the strange circularity of it all fired from Hartwell, hired by Apex, now facilitating Apex's acquisition of Hartwell. If someone had told me 6 months ago sitting on that Paris terrace that this is where I'd end up, I would have laughed or cried. I wasn't sure which. Around 2:00 a.m. I gave up on sleep and went for a walk. New York in winter in the middle of the night was a different city, quieter, harsher, more honest somehow. I walked through Hell's Kitchen down to Times Square, still bright and busy even at this hour. Then over to the Hudson River waterfront. I stood there looking at the water, thinking about all the versions of myself I'd been over the past year. The loyal employee who worked 60-hour weeks. The husband trying to be good enough. The man on vacation who laughed at his father-in-law and hung up the phone. The witness in a federal investigation. The CFO building something new. Which one was real? Maybe all of them. Maybe none of them. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Saw the news about the acquisition bid. I'm glad Apex is doing this. Those employees deserve better than what my family gave them. Thank you for taking care of them. I typed back. How are you doing? Really? Her response came a few minutes later. Some days better than others. The interview helped. Saying it all out loud. Owning my choice. It made it real in a way it wasn't before. I'm moving to Seattle. Fresh start. My advisor at Berkeley found me a research position with an environmental policy think tank. I start next month. That's wonderful. I'm happy for you. Are you happy? That's not a rhetorical question. After everything, are you actually happy? I looked out at the Hudson, at the lights reflecting on the water, at the city behind me that was starting to feel like home. Getting there, I typed. Some days better than others, but getting there. Good. You deserve it. We both do. The bid went in Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, we had confirmation that it was being seriously considered. By Monday, we were in negotiations with the bankruptcy trustee. By Wednesday, we had a deal $38 million for the aerospace division. Employment guarantees included closing dates set for March 15th. James called an all-hands meeting to announce it. Apex Consolidated is acquiring the aerospace manufacturing division of Hartwell Industries, he announced to the assembled staff. This doubles the size of our manufacturing division, adds 65 talented employees to our team, and positions us as a major player in the precision aerospace components market. I want to thank David Chen and his team for the exceptional analysis that made this possible. Everyone applauded. I smiled and nodded, accepting congratulations from colleagues who had no idea how complicated this was for me. After the meeting, Margaret pulled me aside. You okay? This has to be weird. Weird is an understatement. For what it's worth, you're handling it with a lot of grace. I would have burned the place down. I thought about it, decided this was better. She laughed. Revenge via legitimate business acquisition. Very classy, but it wasn't revenge. Or maybe it was, but a different kind. The kind where you win by building something better, not by destroying what came before. That night, I treated my team to dinner at a nice restaurant in Tribeca. My way of saying, thank you for 2 weeks of brutal work. We ate well, drank good wine, and for a few hours, I forgot about the complexity and just enjoyed the victory. On the cab ride home, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. David Chen. A male voice unfamiliar. Speaking. This is Thomas Hartwell, Vanessa's brother. I hope you don't mind. I got your number from Emily. I sat up straighter. Thomas. Hi. What can I do for you? I wanted to thank you for the employment guarantees and the acquisition. My mother, she's been a wreck since the bankruptcy. Worried about all the people losing their jobs. When she heard that Apex was keeping everyone on, she actually cried with relief. It was the right thing to do. Those employees didn't do anything wrong. I know, but you could have gutted the place and no one would have blamed you. After what my father did to you, he trailed off. Anyway, thank you. And David, I'm sorry for all of it. The way our family treated you, the way I stayed silent when I should have spoken up, you deserved better. I appreciate that, Thomas. If you're ever back in Connecticut and want to grab coffee or something, I'd like that. No pressure, but yeah, I'd like that. After we hung up, I sat with that conversation, turning it over in my mind. The Hartwell family was fragmenting Emily gone to Seattle. Vanessa apologizing via text. Thomas reaching out. And at the center of it all, Richard sitting in a jail cell waiting for trial. I'd escaped that family. But they hadn't escaped the consequences of being that family. The wheel keeps turning, I thought. The wheel keeps turning and sometimes the people on top end up on the bottom and the people who were crushed find ways to rise. I was rising and I wasn't done yet. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I didn't attend. Catherine said I didn't need to. My deposition was entered as evidence and Emily's testimony was compelling enough without me sitting in the gallery as a reminder of Richard's crimes. So, I followed it through news reports and Catherine's daily updates, watching from a distance as the man who tried to destroy me was systematically taken apart by federal prosecutors. The verdict came on a Friday in late June. Guilty on all counts. I was in a meeting with aerospace suppliers when Sarah interrupted, holding up her phone with the news alert. The room went quiet as everyone checked their devices simultaneously. Sentencing in 60 days, Catherine texted. 15 to 20 years likely. It's over, David. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like closing a book I'd been forced to read. Relief that it was finished. Not joy at how it ended. That evening, James took me to the rooftop bar where we'd celebrated the Hartwell acquisition closing 3 months earlier. The aerospace division was already exceeding projections. The employees we'd kept had become some of our best performers. Marcus, the security guard, now ran safety protocols for our entire manufacturing division. To justice, James said, raising his glass. To new beginnings, I countered. We drank as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Saw the verdict. How are you feeling? Free. I typed back and I meant it. That night, I stood in my apartment, no longer temporary, officially mine now, and looked at the life I'd built. Photos on the wall from a hiking trip with my team. Books I'd actually had time to read. A kitchen where I cooked dinner instead of eating takeout at my desk. A calendar with vacation do not disturb blocked out for 2 weeks in August. On my desk sat 2 objects. The The Mont Blanc pen I'd used to sign away my old life and the business card James had given me in Paris, now framed. I picked up the card, remembering that moment, the wine, the view, the laughter that had started everything. 6 months ago, Richard Hartwell had called me in Paris and fired me, thinking he was ending my story. Instead, he'd freed me to write a better one. My phone rang one last time. Unknown number, I answered. Mr. Chen, this is Douglas Brennan, Sec. I wanted to personally thank you for your cooperation in the Hartwell case. Your testimony was instrumental. I'm glad I could help. There's one more thing. The whistleblower reward program, you and Miss Hartwell are entitled to a percentage of the penalties assessed. It should be substantial. After he hung up, I laughed. Really laughed. The way I had on that Paris terrace. Richard had tried to destroy me with $15 million in life insurance. Instead, I'd helped destroy him and gotten paid for it. I raised my glass of wine to the empty apartment. To karma, I said, and to never settling for less than I deserve. The city glittered below, full of possibility, and I was finally ready to claim it.